When we get the chance to learn about an overseer, especially one from the distant past, it's usually all bad. They're regularly complicit in whatever monstrous experiment that Vault Tec has cooked up, generally originating from a conversation that started with, "You know what'd be really funny?" Yes, the opinion that we oh so often arrive at is whenever they meet a grisly and hopefully untimely end, that it was ultimately deserved, usually paying back all the karma they've racked up by whatever they subjected their unwitting inhabitants to. People that came to the vault for security and survival, as it was literally the only game in town. Unless you wanted to take your chances with those glorified phone booths. But yeah, we saw how that turned out. But sometimes, rare as it is, we see that Vault Tec manages to screw up in a completely different manner. Instead of appointing someone bereft of human empathy, they manage to put someone in charge that actually has a conscience. Someone who took a look at the ultimate goal of the vaults and gives it 2 big old middle fingers and a hearty, yeah, no. Today we get to learn about one of these rare individuals. Today, we take a look at Vault 81, one of the few vaults that not only opened its doors, but did so without all of its dwellers being dead. A vault that is, quite literally, falling apart after over 2 centuries of constant use. And this plays into a lot of the politics we should become familiar with here. But for quite a few people, this is as far as they go. They didn't learn about its other side, its darker side, about the secret vault beneath this one, and the morally bereft experiment that, if not for the overseer who said enough, would have likely killed all its inhabitants long ago. Apologies for how long this took, but to be fair, look how long it is. And if my voice sounds a little off, I was under the weather for some of the recordings. If you enjoyed this video, as always, likes and comments really help out the video's performance, and they're greatly appreciated. Now, let's dive in. The entrance to the vault is situated in a cave that can be found southwest of Boston. Around it, we can find the remnants of the old equipment Vault Tec left. But something else we see is kind of a makeshift shantytown. Now initially, maybe you thought, ah yes, the vault went on fire again, and the only dwellers left alive now live in sheds by the lake. Outstanding. Well no, in fact some of the people who frequently use this little town can be found here, depending on the time of day. Traders. Now this again is a departure from the norm. Usually when we find a vault, it's been long abandoned. Rare is it that we actually find people inside to do anything, let alone trade with. But this seems to be the case here, to a limited extent. As we explore, we'll learn more about the attitude towards outsiders in this vault, and how their circumstances shape their attitude. Now there is a story here, told to us as part of several quests, and we shall take a look at them as we move through the vaults, and talk to the various people inside. To this end, I divided the video up into chapters as usual. However, if you want to skip all the surface level information from either the vault dwellers or the main vault terminals, and just get into the dark underbelly of this place, you can find them in the timestamps. Heading into the cave, we can see the vault is indeed open, or at least open to us once we talk to the overseer. Heading inside, we can see the vault does have an active turret system which, together with us being questioned before we're let in, is the first indicator that they aren't really that trusting of non-dwellers. Which, I mean, technically we are a dweller, even if the total amount of dwelling from our point of view was incredibly short. But still. Now upon requesting entry, we are told we have to bring them fusion cores, a strange request for a vault, which is usually thought of as self-sufficient, and already gives us a hint as to why there are traders set up outside. The following is the interaction we get.
Hold it right there. Vault 81 security. I don't know where you got your hands on a working Pip-Boy, but you better start talking.
Vault 81? You're still up and running?
Yeah. Pretty good observation there, genius. Now about that Pip-Boy.
Why are you asking about my Pip-Boy?
We get plenty of scavengers and traders passing by the entrance. Everybody wants to get at the shiny red button. But you're the first one to try it with a working Pip-Boy. Now where'd you get it?
I got it in Vault 111.
Vault 111? Haven't heard of that one yet. And what sort of business are you looking to take care of here in 81?
What's with the third degree?
It's called protocol. Think we just let anyone in here? Think again.
Who is it, Edwards?
Ma'am, some new Commonwealth traveler. Not one of our usual traders.
Well, if someone wants in, they can earn it like everyone else. Let me speak to them. Sorry about that. Officer Edwards here was just doing his job. I'm sure you can understand our need for caution. For newcomers, we like to operate on exchange. You help us, we help you.
But I'm a fellow Vault dweller. Can't you just let me in?
Excuse me, ma'am. Before you arrived, he did say he was from Vault 111. And he's in possession of a working pit-boy.
Is that so? I'm going to allow it. Edwards, open the door and make the announcement. Officer Edwards and I will meet you at the entrance.
Now, since our tongue is actually the grafted corpse of the snake from the Garden of Eden, we can convince them to open up, and we can slither in. Here we do get some more dialogue, both from the Overseer and a man called Calvin, and it first brings to light some of the issues the Vault is having, both with supplies and with maintenance. But more on that very soon. Heading into the Vault itself, and ignoring the door on the left, you don't need to worry about that just yet. We get to see our first Vault 81 dwellers. They are less than thrilled to see our lovely faces. In fact, they appear to fall firmly in the camp of non-dwellers out. We get warned multiple times to not make trouble, to watch ourselves, and we even get accused of killing someone for their Pip-Boy, or stealing it, which is frankly none of their business. But apart from that, the place is in pretty good nick, much better than you'd expect after 200 years. Although we can immediately see people hard at work in repairs, which is something that comes up again and again in this vault, and is actually the reason why it was opened, although the cause is much more nefarious than just ordinary wear and tear. Approaching the entrance to the lower levels, we actually see the radiation scrubbers are still active, which does make sense, as to them, the outside still seems like a dangerous, irradiated place. Now we know this is not the case. It's perfectly safe, sometimes provided you don't step in a puddle, or get caught out in a radiation storm, or eat irradiated food. Okay, it's not safe, and them wanting to purge it from people coming in is probably a really good idea. Situated right beside it is a security room, and I imagine this was done so they can get a good look at whoever is coming in to try and determine if they're going to be trouble or not. This is a fear the Overseer brings up in her logs later on, but is constantly outweighed by their need to not starve, or run out of tools needed to repair the vault. Heading down the elevator past the scrubbers, we get to the main atrium of the vaults, and it is thriving. Also, the Overseer comes off as initially quite evil, as they just ominously look down on everyone while they're trying to go about their day. But really, lovely woman. Even here, we can view quite a few people making repairs to the vaults, and all this just gets worse as we move deeper in. We can see they've got quite a few stores and shops in this main area. There's a goods store where provisions are being sold, and it's here that you'll come across one of the younglings that wants help with a cat that did a runner when we showed up. A cat that somehow, despite presumably being a vault cat, doesn't immediately die when it goes outside. I'm also curious where they got it from. Like, did they just have cats in the vault this whole time, or did they bring it in from the outside? In this store can be found one of the most useless residents that constantly complains about outsiders coming into the vaults. You know, despite the fact that their livelihood is from selling the supplies that they're literally brought in by these people. Or at least some of them, as Alexis, their wife, says the supplies are 2 centuries old. Additionally, Austin says they don't get any food from the Commonwealth, but I'm pretty sure some of the food is from the traders, given some of the entries we see later, literally talking about food from the outside. Now, are you all ready for a bit of hot goss? Apparently Holt, the man I was referring to, is making the beast of 2 backs with Tina, another dweller here. We can actually find them later just standing in a closet, but there isn't much more to it. I just wanted to mention it to drive home how big a tool this lad is. They've also got a barber's on the lower floor, ran by someone from the waste that they actually allowed to stay. Presumably, they all looked terrible before he brought this skill set here. Next is the cafeteria, that has a mix of both pre- and post-war food. Some of it may be bought from traders, but some is being grown here, as we can find out by talking to one of the dwellers. First though, one of the few dwellers that are actually welcoming to outsiders can be found here, Maria Sommerset, the elderly woman manning the cafeteria here, and the one having to do a lot more with less these days, as we shall see. She gives a lot of useful information regarding how the vault supply situation is changing, and how people feel about the outside.
Hello, Maria.
You must be that new traveler, Gwen, lady. It's always nice to see a new face around here.
Who's Gwen?
Oh, Gwen's the Overseer, but I could never get used to calling her that. I've known that girl since she was in diapers. If you need any food for the road, or just feeling hungry, you let me know. Our menu isn't quite as exotic as the Commonwealth, but it'll do in a pinch.
Do you run this place by yourself?
Heavens no, I'd be a wreck. My husband, Mark, he helps me. though mostly with the tasting.
Is it hard work feeding everyone here?
It used to be easier. Back when I was young, we had more supplies than we could count. Why, my mother taught me some recipes that had ingredients that... well, I doubt you could find them anywhere anymore. Since we started trading, we managed well enough, but the variety... let's just say it's more than a bit lacking.
Have you ever thought about leaving the vault?
Never. Can you imagine? Born and raised right here in Vault 81. It was easier back then, you know. Supplies were high, and the dangers outside were both severe and unknown. Poor Gwen didn't know what she was getting into when she accepted the role of Overseer.
How is Gwen doing as the Overseer?
It weighs on her, I can tell. We need help from the Commonwealth, but a few people, they don't care for it. Not to mention the state of the vault. Upkeep's got people working round the clock these days. Even me. If people are going to be up all night working, they'll need a good meal to keep them going.
I'll think about it.
All right. Just don't spoil your appetite.
Excuse me, Maria.
Hungry, dear? I'm sure I have something that'll fill you up.
Now first off, Mark, my lad, I feel like if your primary form of assistance is tasting, you're not really helping to the best of your abilities. Come on now, muck in. But really, the most interesting information we get is about how the supply situation of the vaults has been changing. Now Martha is a Vault 81 dweller, born and bred, and she also looks to be in her 70s or 80s. Now it's hard to say what exactly she means by younger years, but given her mother was alive at that point, let's say it was at least 50 years ago, that means that, up until at least the last decade or so, the vault has been doing well. This is despite the size of the population, and, as we shall soon learn, there may not have been, let's say, a huge expectation of a large number surviving for as long as they did. Yet despite that, they've had supplies for centuries. The schematic for the vault actually claims the max occupancy is 96, but it's unknown if the stockpile of supplies matches that. We will soon learn that the other secret part of the vault was equipped with centuries worth of supplies, and this offers some hope now that we've cleared it, though more on that later. She finishes by saying that, despite the knowledge of dwindling supplies, most people still don't like outsiders coming into the vault, even after all this time. It's a constant theme that will come up again and again as we explore. She also just throws it out there that people are also working because of the state of the vault, hence the large number of them constantly repairing things around the vault. Now we get several sources of information about this, one from one of the dwellers that is placed in charge of the maintenance here in the vaults, Calvin, another from Mark, the man that apparently taste tests, and Neil, the fellow to the left, as we entered the vault.
Not even for just a moment?
A moment? Well, I suppose. Not like I actually want to get back to work.
What do you do here?
Me? I'm just the lucky sucker in charge of maintenance here. Sorry if you heard me bickering with the Overseer earlier. She and I don't always see eye to eye.
You guys have been living here over 200 years. This place is bound to be in decline.
In decline? You must be one of those politically correct types. Old 81 here, she's a straight-up wreck. Pretty solid for a while, easy enough to keep up with her needs, but in the last few years or so, damn, she got feisty. Been going through tools like they were going out of style, so if you got any, I'd be more than happy to take them off your hands.
Maybe. I'll see.
Well, let's just say if you find yourself back in 81 with some spares on you, come find me. We'll always be needing more. That's the sad truth. Anyway, here I am running my mouth when there's work to do. Sorry I can't talk longer, stranger, but mind the maintenance. Shouldn't get in your way, at least.
Come again? What do you mean?
Well, Gwenny... Oops. I mean the Overseer never lets anyone in unless we need something. I figured someone put in a request with her if we got a new face in the vault. Lord knows we could use some help around.
I'm afraid that information's classified, sir. If I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Gwenny let in a good one. That sense of humor is just what this vault needs. The people here, they're a bit overworked these days. Some blame the Overseer. But it ain't Gwenny's fault. Poor girl. Just landed the right position at the wrong time.
What's going on? Why are people so overworked?
Well, you live in the same place for 200 years. Time just takes its toll. Until the Overseer opened the vault to the traders, we were just slapping on one band-aid after the next. Now we're just scrambling to keep old 81 together.
It's not easy being a leader.
Truer words were never spoke. I wouldn't want her job in a million years. Well, I best be getting back to it. Don't want the old lady on me again. 62 years old and still fiery as ever.
Mark.
Everyone's working around the clock these days.
Why the long hours?
We're just making sure this roof over our heads doesn't cave in on us. They say it's all the moving parts that have us working round the clock these days. Structurally, I guess 81 is still pretty sound. Vault Tec sure knew what they were doing when they set these places up. Well, I don't want to keep you, and I gotta get back to work. Maybe I'll see you around.
The primary takeaway from our chat with the three of them is the decline of the vault. Just like the food supplies are starting to go down, the state of the vault is deteriorating as well. Now Calvin does drop that it wasn't always like this. That, with their current manpower and the tools they had on hand, it was manageable. In fact, they were able to keep it running at a decent level for the past 2 centuries. But in the past few years, around the time they also had to make the choice to open up or die in isolation, things started to run down quicker. This might also explain some of the animosity we shall come to see that many hold against outsiders. From their point of view, things started to go wrong when they let them in. This has resulted in a shortage of tools that can actually affect repairs, which could be causing an accumulation of damage that otherwise could be addressed if the right ones were available. However, the problem isn't just the vault's age. Remember, they were built to last, and this one was no exception. The issue is what is going on underneath, but we'll get to that. Mark also confirms that the opening of the vault for new supplies was the only thing that kept them going. Before that, they weren't able to keep up with the proper repairs, only implementing short-term fixes. However, even now, he says they're barely getting by, which implies that even with all these new supplies, the vault is getting worse, almost as if something is making the problem accelerate. Well, there is something beneath this vault, but we need to keep exploring to find out exactly what that is. Now, also located in the main atrium is Dr. Penske, a studious woman who's trying to alleviate or even overcome completely the vault's dependence on both external trading and their dwindling food supplies. Heading into her small workplace/lab, we find we don't find a lot of crops. This stage of her work, as we shall soon see, isn't really about producing a large quantity of them. It's about experimenting with new strains to establish ones that can be grown in the vault effectively, and also be resistant to radiation. This work is therefore crucial to the vault's survival, given their gradually dwindling food supply. Additionally, given the deterioration of the vault, at some point, they may need to leave it if something doesn't change. If this is the case, then having a crop adapted to the outside, more so than what is already on hand, would be a huge boon. Real quick though, and we do bring it up later, I'm really not sure how old this hydroponics lab is. From what she tells us, I got the impression she started it, or at least got it to the state it's in right now. But an entry we find in the secret vault may imply it's far, far older. You'll see what I mean later, but if it is that old, then very little progress seems to have been made until recently. We can take a look at her terminal here to see what research she's already conducting. The first set of entries is test group A14-1, with 3 entries covering a period of 3 weeks. The first week states that germination was fast and the plant is growing well, with the cell structure appearing to be normal. 2 of the samples, 5 and 9, both have, and I'm definitely going to mispronounce this, cotyledons, and the second is displaying a purple stripe pattern. Any botanists among you, translations of these terms such as radicals, hippocotyls, and cotyledons, beyond just a Wikipedia entry, are appreciated. Also, please for the love of God, somebody correct my pronunciation. Week 2 tells us that the seedlings are growing well and will be ready for transplant, which I assume means removal and placing them elsewhere, possibly other soil. The 2 with the cotyledons are thriving despite their deviations from the other plants. 2 have unfortunately died, although Dr. Penske doesn't seem to believe the coloration was the cause, or at least it wasn't a sign of an infection or a parasite. Given she is modifying these plants, this could just mean that whatever she did caused it to die. Week 3 indicates that all growth, aside from 2, is still progressing, and the transplant was successful. So whatever strain of vegetation this is, she seems to be seeing some success from it. The next set of entries is about test group B02-3, and it's not as successful as the first set. The first week already shows this group falling behind. Germination is slower than expected, and only 50% of them have sprouted, with the radicals barely appearing at all, indicating that even the sprouting is failing. She doesn't think the rest of them will even sprout, and then drops that apparently they have an even greater chance of failure due to exposure to radiation. That should rule this strain out entirely from a type that could ever thrive outside the vault. The second week shows some progress, with the 50% that already sprouted still growing, and the remaining 25% at least sprouting, so 3 out of 4 isn't too bad overall. However, 4 of them have died from overwatering, but we don't know how many she planted, so we don't know whether this is all that have died, or just some subset, and as a result wouldn't be a problem. She at least succeeded in lowering their dependency on water, which is why this happened. So a possible upside, and now she can take steps to prevent killing the rest. Also, given the issues with the vaults, the chances of there being water shortages are pretty high, so having crops that don't depend on it as much is always a plus. The final entry states that only 4 of them have been transplanted, and since the bonus 25% sprouted, no more have, indicating that they were failures. Given the small amount she transplanted, I think losing those 4 was definitely a big deal. But overall she seems to be making progress, between the smaller amount of seeds sprouting with lower water dependency, to the other group that's seen more success. She's slowly making inroads. We can go and talk to her to learn a little more about her work, and then have her ask us to possibly ingest a plant that will kill us.
Why don't you just tell me about yourself?
Me? I'm the vault biologist and hydroponic gardener. Everything you see here, I grew, including this new fruit I just developed. But I need someone to test it. Sure I can't talk you into trying it?
Is it dangerous?
Well, everything has its risks, I suppose, but that's what the medical center is for.
Nah, what the hell. I'll try it.
Excellent. Just tell me how it tastes and how it makes you feel. Now where'd I put that Geiger counter?
So, is this your life's work?
Just a small part of it. My hope is to create a strain of foods that have increased resistance to radiation. What good is fresh produce if it's always contaminated by its environment? That particular strain of mute fruit should do well, but I wasn't certain how the hybridization would affect the flavor and the texture.
It was good. No adverse effects.
I knew it! This is good progress. I'll have to start a new batch right away. Since you've been so helpful, maybe you can help out in another capacity. You see, I need these plants to conduct my studies, and they take some special nourishment, especially the carrots. If you could keep an eye out for fertilizer while you're out in the Commonwealth, I'll be more than happy to compensate you for your efforts.
Sure, I can do that.
Really? Great. I was dreading having to put in another request to the Overseer. Just bring by whatever you can find whenever you have the time.
Now first off, Penske, that's some avoidance there. Thankfully the fruit is not dangerous, or at least didn't appear to have any immediately harmful effects. Perhaps we'll just die one day, we don't know. But the possibilities for this fruit, if it can actually remove radiation poisoning, are huge. A good example of her work arming the dwellers of Vault 81 with the supplies and food they'll need to survive if, and likely when, they have to finally leave. Or, you know, have to flee screaming as the hyper-intelligent molerat problem that we'll get to later escalates. Now, you've probably been wondering, why does it look like she's got on more paint to stalk someone through a marsh and cut their throat? I don't know. A few of the residents here have these marks on them, and I haven't got an explanation for it. Initially I thought it was a bug. Now I'm not too sure. It could just be a way to show they have dirt or grease on them from all their work for maintaining the vaults. But in Dr. Penske's case, it just seems very extreme. I mean, how would she have this much dirt on her from just such a small amount of plants? Some of the other residents, specifically Tina, have the same look. If you've any ideas, I'm happy to hear them. I guess they could have been injured while working, but apart from that, I don't have a sausage. Heading to the back of the main atrium, we can go to the office of the woman who is ominously looking out over everyone, but is actually a very pleasant person stuck with a crap job. The Overseer Gwen, who made the choice to open the vault due to degradation of the overall structure and the dwindling supplies they had on hand. Believe it or not, her office is one of the few Overseer offices we encounter that actually doesn't have a dead body in it. Usually because whatever experiment they tried to inflict on the dwellers going sideways. The only real thing of note is the incredibly tattered flag in the corner. Given its age, I'm going to guess it was the original one that was placed in the vaults 2 centuries ago. On the wall, we can actually see the supposed layout of the vault, though this is in fact not the true vault, housing the true experiment here. It says the max capacity was 96 people, though again, this is only for the surface level vault, not the one hidden beneath, which had its own infrastructure and supplies. Additionally, given the real experiment, The numbers chosen for this vault were likely done in relation to giving the ideal test sample size of subjects for the scientists in the other vault. We don't get any information on them from the Overseer or her terminal, as she herself is completely ignorant of the true purpose of the vault, or at least what its true purpose was meant to be. Indeed, as we shall learn, pretty much all the Overseers, apart from the first one, were ignorant. Now to go back to the initial dialogue we got when we entered the vault.
Come on, Gwen. My guys have been working doubles for weeks now. They need a break.
Everyone's working hard right now, Cal. You think I don't know that? Just do the best with what you can.
Another outsider.
That's all I'm asking.
What they let you in
I'll
for.
see what I can do. But you and I both know we can't keep going on like this.
Sorry about that. As you'll soon see, we have a few maintenance projects underway. Gwen McNamara, Overseer. Welcome to Vault 81. We've never encountered a fellow Vault Dweller. Is this Vault 111 you mentioned still operational?
Have you ever seen any other Vault Dwellers?
You're the first. In all our time here, not a single traveler from another vault. Here, we pride ourselves on having maintained a successful vault over these past 2 centuries. We'd like to be completely self-sufficient, but there are certain resources we can't provide ourselves.
Why do you keep yourself so isolated?
Why not? We have warm beds, clean clothes, a solid roof over our heads. Our food and water are radiation-free. We don't deal with the elements or raiders. We're safe here. And for some, that safety and stability is what counts.
Aren't you curious about the Commonwealth and what it has to offer?
Of course. But my duty is to these people and keeping them safe. We receive a few select traders often enough to stay well informed. Now, I have work to do. If you need anything else, I'll be in my office.
So Calvin has brought up these issues with the Overseer herself, and people are working double shifts just to stop the vault caving in around them. Now, to be honest, I think these double shifts might feed into a certain substance issue we see later on, but it seems like a bit of a feedback loop. People are using all the tools and supplies to fix the vault, but they're exhausted, so they may be making mistakes, and the problems are not getting sorted out properly. On top of that, with so much work, they get even hungrier, which puts an increased strain on the food supplies they have. The Overseer is upfront about this sustainability issue, which is why she requested power cores from us, and Penske does the work with fertilizer, but the issues are getting worse, and this is highlighted in her terminal entries. Now, I will mention here that one of the dwellers, Miranda, definitely has a good reason to hate outsiders. To hear her tell it, she fell in love with what I assume was a trader, and then, after giving them all their money so they could find them a place to live outside the vaults, they ghosted them. Allegedly, they turned up in Diamond City, but I've never encountered them, so I can't be sure. Now, if it's all true, that woman deserves to die in the wastelands. It's an awful thing to do to someone. However, it's a bit unfair using that brush to tar everyone. But then again, people literally do this all the time. Also, what money did they give them? I mean, the vault uses caps, but we don't really get any information about how its economy functioned before it was open 10 years ago. I suppose, when they realized they needed to pay people from outside in caps, they just took all the caps they have presumably been storing somewhere as trash. Now, back to the Overseer's office, and her terminal entries. Her terminal has 3 sections: supply requests, maintenance requests, and the logs. The supply requests are put into the Overseer as possible purchase requests from the new traders allowed into the vault to do business. Additionally, as Mark pointed out in our conversation, the only other time new people are allowed in is so they can go and retrieve the various supplies the vault needs, like us. The 3 fusion cores were requests from Dr. Penske and fulfilled by us. It's a little odd she did, however, as the maintenance of the reactor doesn't fall to her. Regardless, they do shed light on how bad the current situation in the vault really is. Specifically, if they need new blood and stim packs for the medical bay, run by Jacob Forsyth, and fusion cores for the reactor, then that means their supplies either very low or completely gone, and they totally depend on these orders being fulfilled. Now, if that is the case, then the situation in the vault is far worse than some people seem to realize, which explains why there is still some reluctance towards working with outsiders. Some people just don't seem to realize how dependent they are on them. The next set of entries are the maintenance requests, with the first being for the 2nd floor atrium vent. It's leaking, hopefully just water and not waste, and it needs fixed. She seems to hope that a patch job will do, which according to Clive is something they just make do with around here. After this is the main level corridor. The pipes are corroding and sections of the floor may need replacing. Now, she says they need a closer look behind the scenes to see just how bad it is. Just remember this, as the damage behind the scenes in recent years is actually quite a big contributor to all of this, and the cause is part of the story here. Lastly is entry, which, would you believe it, is actually about the entryway to the vault. The area is starting to flood because the sealant is beginning to give away. Now, given the molerat issue and the tunneling, I think they are related, and the increased flooding is happening because the wee bastards are ripping apart everything behind the scenes. But overall, the vault is falling apart, and it's happening faster than they can put her back together. The final set of entries are Gwen's logs, and they serve to highlight the issues she faces as Overseer, mostly due to a lot of people in the vault being idiots, following the proud tradition of a lot of people in vaults being idiots. The first entry is repairs, repairs, repairs. To put it lightly, she's incredibly stressed about the state the vault is in, but she keeps having to put on a brave face as she's the Overseer, having taken over for Overseer Bat. She says no one told her it was a sinking ship. To me, that seems to indicate that the current feelings of the vaults were not as bad before she got the job, or if they were hid well, and for some reason Bat didn't tell her. This could imply that they did actually know more about the truth of the place, but I still think that only the first knew the score. Calvin has told her it's external, but as we shall see, that's only half true. It's external to their part of the vault, but technically still internal to the overall vault, just that it's coming from the part that they don't have access to. But this does mean it seems to be more recent, or to have accumulated over time, and is only now visibly affecting their section of the vault. The reactor is the only thing that doesn't seem to have any issues, being repaired by a Mr. Handy called Old Rusty. Now this seems to imply that no one else seems to know how to repair it, but this seems unlikely, as a single point of failure like that would be ridiculous. The only issue they actually seem to be having is a shortage of reactor cores. The reactor could have also been made to a higher spec, as it needs to effectively run 2 vaults, which we'll get to soon. Entry 2 is about the anti-Commonwealth faction of the vault. A dweller was literally telling a trader they don't need them. Apparently Holt and Miranda were the culprits, though the overall vibe is there are others. This is funny, as these two literally run the supply depot, so they should be well aware how low the supplies currently are. Gwen is pretty frank with how bad the situation is, saying they'd all starve and wouldn't be able to effect repairs if not for outsiders. This would imply that either most people are truly ignorant of how bad the situation is, or are just choosing to ignore it. She talks about the fear of letting in the wrong person, and it is a fair one. I mean, they let us in, and we are killing people in their sleep. But apparently they've known some of the traders and people they've let in for years. Horatio, the barber, is in fact from the outside, but they still fear him. Gwen herself acknowledges this could be valid, and maybe the wrong person will be let in one day, but they don't really seem to be in a position to do anything about it, due to their alliance. One explanation for the animosity is that, given it's been 10 years, if things in the vault have been getting worse all this time, some blame the outsiders. Now this of course doesn't make any sense, and acts as a good litmus test to tell if someone is a smooth brain, but it could be the case. The third entry is about a character that plays a role in the story that unfolds here, Bobby DeLuca. Apparently he has a bit of a substance abuse problem. Somehow, despite the fact that he is using, he is managing to hide it from everyone else. They just find him after he's already taken something, not in the process and not a stash. Almost as if he has a secret hiding place for it all. Her main issue is he doesn't do any of the work that's been assigned to him. He apparently gets the Mr. Handy that was mentioned earlier to pick up his slack. Now, given we find him in the reactor area, I assume this is just because his sister's there, and that old Rusty's primary focus was the reactor, and Bobby just assigned him other tasks. If not, I question why he's been given such an important responsibility, as if he messed it up, they'd all be without power. Also, messing with the one robot in the vault that can actually repair the reactor seems like it would be enough alone to get him locked up, but more on this oxygen thief later. Lastly, we have Food Glorious Food, an entry talking about the loss of crops, specifically the ones Dr. Penske was working on. She says they don't have the space to do more rotations, which I assume is affecting the soil, as this is usually done to prevent too many nutrients from being stripped from it. But they kind of do. I mean, they could set up outside and offset some of these issues. She starts reminiscing about when they first started to try food from outside the vault that Maria made, and Dr. Forsyth seems to be against this. Stands to reason, as there could be a lot of viruses and bacteria in the meat that people in the Commonwealth have a tolerance to, and the vault dwellers would not, to say nothing of the radiation in the meat. At the very least, they still seem to have a good supply of moot fruit, although it is very easy to grow and easy to come by. Overall, it seems like the Overseer is pretty weary. During her time as the Overseer, the situation in the vault has only gotten worse. Unfortunately, this means a lot of people will blame her for what is happening to the vault, despite the fact that she clearly isn't the one going around sabotaging it on purpose. They also seem to blame the people she's been letting in, despite this being a step that she took to ensure the vault's survival due to their dwindling supplies. How they don't see this, I don't know. But I suppose for stupid people, it's a lot easier to blame everyone else for why things are going badly for you, rather than accept that sometimes things just go wrong. No one is to necessarily blame. This is the case here, as the vault falling apart is the external issue they can't fix, and the dwindling supplies are because the vault has a finite amount. There's also a few odd comments from Dr. Penske, outside conversations, that something seems to be off with the water, so this might also be affecting their ability to grow crops. This could just be a throwaway line, or it might actually link into the other part of the vault here. We'll have to keep looking. Heading back into the atrium, and ignoring a lot of passive-aggressive remarks, because if they want pistols at dawn, we'll give it to them. We can head into the residential area. Here we can also find the medical bay and reactor, both of which we'll look at first, as they really start to give us the information we need to start piecing this place together. The medical bay is fairly large, with several beds present in the same room, and a lot of equipment just lying out in the open, ready to steal, which is surprising as they're apparently short on a lot of stuff, so you'd think they'd keep it under lock and key more often. I mean, sweet Krimva, he has blood packs he claims he needed just lying out unrefrigerated. No one's here when we show up, although don't worry, there will be a youngling heading towards the light before too long. Dr. Forsyth and Rachel are the two in charge here, and it seems like a big operation for a vault with so few sick people, which we'll get to in a minute, as this does relate to the real experiment. Looking at the terminal here, we can see some of what does ail the people here. The first entry is on the Overseer, Gwen McNamara. She is in excellent health, capital E, apart from some side effects from bronchitis as a child. She has to carry around an inhaler now. From the anti-inflammatory part, I assume this is because the infections mentioned could cause inflammation, which could obstruct her airway, but I'm not 100% on that, so any doctors in medicine, please weigh in. The next patient is Mark Sommerset, the taster himself. Apparently not long for this world, and shall soon be fertilizing the moot fruit in his wife's pies. I only partially kid, I'm just assuming they use their dead as fertilizer. Yes, Dr. Penske does ask us to bring her some, but it just makes sense to me. Somehow, he keeps getting pneumonia, which is odd given where they live. Unless the heating is also constantly breaking, which, I mean, yeah, definitely could be. He also has a kidney disease. From a comment we'll get soon, he's sort of a counter-argument to the vault's health. Dr. Penske is next. She's getting on in her years, so the arthritis has come a knocking. Brain still works fine though, so overall, all good. Lastly is the vault's hardest working scarecrow, Bobby. Seems to have gotten himself addicted to chems. Now this is the same Bobby that the Overseer mentioned, so he's addicted to more than one chem. We'll learn how he keeps getting them, although how this initially started out, well, we can't be 100% sure. Overall, he's not doing too great, but he's also an arsehole, so it's fine. Overall, the vault is somewhat healthy, which is weird because we get the following comment from Rachel, the other doctor, in the medical bay.
Do you get a lot of patients in the vault?
No, the people of this vault are surprisingly healthy. If that's all, I have work to do.
Now this explains why the medical bay is so empty. The terminal entries somewhat seem to contradict this, but we don't know how old they are, given the level of work everyone is undertaking. If only this small amount of people have gotten sick over a long period of time, then yes, the vault is very healthy. But this leaves the question of why is this? What makes them healthy, if there is a reason? Well, first we need to have a brief talk with Jacob, the head doctor here, and then we can go and find a very interesting terminal. Additionally, when we enter the vault, we get a comment from Austin saying hardly anyone ever gets sick in the vault.
Welcome back. Change your mind about donating some medical samples?
Why do you need medical samples?
It's for my research. The people of Vault 81 have been genetically isolated from the Commonwealth for many generations. I'm trying to determine what the genetic variation is between the two populations.
Sure, you can have some blood.
Excellent. Just have a seat, and I'll draw some blood. This'll only take a sec. There. Hardly hurt a bit, eh? Thank you. This will be a great help. Now, I need to get these prepared immediately.
So not a huge amount in the way of revelations here, but he is interested in seeing how the people of the Commonwealth and this vault have genetically diverged. And that is very important, as the people here, or at least their ancestors, may have been purposely selected due to their health. But we need to take a look at a certain master lock terminal to get more information. This terminal is located inside an old Vault Tec storage unit, mobile unit? The hell do you call this? Anyway, we find it under the stairs in the reactor room, which we'll discuss after. Beside it is a note saying this was Overseer Olivettes' terminal, and that it can't be unlocked, which is to say you need someone smart enough to do it. Someone convinced some overseer to let them set up a new one as they couldn't get into it. They state they don't think it was being used anymore, which is kind of true, as we'll see. But the note implies this was placed down here after Olivette died, and a new overseer was selected. If they were still alive and wouldn't give the password, I assume it would mention that. But anyway, on to the terminal. So this is the overseer's terminal, and buckle up because there is a lot of information on it. Like, it fills in a lot of blanks. Due to this, if you want to skip ahead, do so, as we're going to be here a while. The first entry is Welcome to Vault 81. It confirms that Overseer Olivette was the first overseer of the vaults, and it starts to dole out the Kool-Aid, saying this is a critical research opportunity and how important it is for mankind, etc, etc. Now, to be fair, this vault may have actually been useful, even if the way the research was going to be carried out was monstrous. Olivette apparently has a background in academia and applied medical research, with some experience in holding scrum and team meetings as well. It doesn't give any more information as to the overall goal in this entry. The prime directive entry after this, however, spills the beans. Reading that first paragraph. You best strap in, my brother and sisters in Ra. They want to research diseases and how they mutate in the presence of heavy radiation, which is actually a really good idea, as it's literally what is going on with the world right now. But then the next part shows the usual, how can we make the end of the world even worse mentality from Vault Tec. They want to conduct human trials on the vault population. Well, to be precise, they want to do it on cultures in a petri dish, heterocephalus glabbers, also known as molerats, or the brethren of the soil. Then they want to use people as test subjects. They want to place the residents and scientists in two separate parts of the vault to prevent cross-contamination, either of the research group or one group infecting the other. Only the Overseer was to know about the Prime Directive, and this is very important, because as we shall see, Olivette took that information to the grave with them. The entry after this is the admission protocol. Due to the impending end of the world, all the vault staff had to participate in emission drills on all days where there was a heightened sense of alert. Was the sky going to rain fire on, say, Monday? From the name, this was presumably so they could correctly get into the vaults and away from the general populace in the scrum and panic that would no doubt be occurring in large degrees due to the world being on fire. They were to separate from the rest of the dwellers and then get into their closed sections of the vault. Apparently, no one thought to exclude anyone who the scientists may know, which in my opinion could definitely impact whether or not they could carry out their duties, or they were screened to make sure they all didn't have souls, although in the case of the Overseer, this isn't true. After all this was done, and the residents were safely tucked away, the Overseer would start colluding with the science staff, who themselves were sealed up in their part of the vault. Well, seems straightforward enough. And yet, all this time later, people in the vault are still alive, and the mole rats are emerging, presumably, from the secret part of the vault. So something seems to have went very wrong. Or right, if you are a resident here. The entry after this is the evacuation protocol, and the gist of it is, don't do it unless we give the all clear, and also burn the normies when we do. All the research was to be archived on a mainframe, presumably so it could connect to and back up to Vault Tec systems. The only physical materials to be kept were anything related to successful Phase 3 trials, which makes sense as anything short of this could actually be harmful if it got out. If they do get the order, they are to trigger the propellant nozzles in all the living quarters and burn everyone alive. Sweet Christ. The sort of silver lining seems to be that, unless Vault Tec specifically orders it, the Overseer can choose not to turn the vault into an oven. But let's be honest, if they were prepared to kill almost everyone here by a test going wrong, would they really care enough not to do it if it was more convenient than letting everyone out? After this are two incredibly long sets of entries. The first are the Overseer's logs, and the second the logs regarding the research by the science staff. Looking at the Overseer's logs, the first entry, titled A Job's a Job, gives us a very intimate look at this Overseer and their misgivings about the position. Someone called Duncan was meant to be the Overseer, but due to illness it fell to Olivettes. They're surprised about this, given their political background. Which, given what we shall read, I assume means they have misgivings about experimenting on people, for some unknowable reason, of course. They suspect it's going to involve human trials, but they're hopeful this is wrong, and it won't actually lead to that. If it does, they're prepared to get Congress involved, which will do nothing as Vault Tec were puppeting everything in the shadows at this point, so good luck with that. The entry after this, which is titled Drills, 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 is shockingly about Deathclaws. I'm just kidding, it's about drills. They have a lot of them, and it all seems to be to prepare them for a rapid entry into the vault to set everything up when the nukes are launched, presumably in the time span between the early warning system and the time it takes for an ICBM to reach Boston. Olivettes is the one having to make the calls to get people in, many of whom are still university students. likely all grad students from her comment, which explains the extreme need for money, as all in academia will know. Now, why they're having to make the calls, as opposed to having an automated system like we hear about later, I'm not sure. It might also be the case that the level of frequency of the drills at this point is because Vault Tec knows it's all going to kick off very soon. Entry 3 is titled What to Do, and it's great news. The Overseer has been informed by Vault Tec that this is in fact not one of the boring control vaults. They kid to hurt people. Thank Crimva. They also learn that Vault Tec has a lot of backing in the government, and that means that blowing the whistle is a little more complicated, as in they can't do it under any circumstance. The dwellers for the vault have already been picked out, and given their comment about good people planning to live here, I think they know some of them. We already saw that this was foreseen by Vault Tec, and you were to limit contact with anyone you knew once you got into the vaults. They're not sure what to do, but they don't want to go through with what Vault Tec has planned. It's a very strange thing to be reading about the conscience of an Overseer prepared to actually protect their charges, to be honest. Also, why were they confident that these entries, on a terminal presumably supplied by Vault Tec, weren't being read by them? It seems careless to put them on here, unless they knew for certain no one was checking them. The next entry is about the day the bombs fell. Someone called Rosario always calls them, and then they take the next steps. This person's voice betrayed them, and they got confirmation a few hours later. Now, this is actually pretty interesting, as I assume the warning was something everyone had access to, along with the news. But that means that Vault Tec had enough access on both sides to know they were preparing to launch, or at least preparing for the other side to try it. Now, given how much discussion there is on just how involved they were with the launches, or from the TV show 100% caused it, it makes sense they would have known ahead of time, or at least with enough time to prep the vaults. It also makes a lot more sense as to how the vaults were ready to receive people, than the staff also just running there along with the dwellers. The Overseer sabotaged the phone list that sends out the notifications, so none of the science staff who were supposed to administer the clinical trials were to get them. But as we mentioned earlier, they had to contact them, so I'm not sure why it's changed now. But they did it. They took a big step to protect the people coming into this vault. The question is whether or not, in the end, it's going to make a difference. Unfortunately, the next entry, science staff, confirms this wasn't enough. 3 of them still made it in. 2 who lived in the fens right beside the vault, and some arsehole overachiever Burrow who just wanted to be prepared if there was a drill. The scum. But they made it into the vault, and they've been sealed inside their part of the vault. I think this entry must be a few days to a week later, as they were already busy with work, and you'd think it would take them a beat or two to come to grips with the end of the world. Or they were all sociopaths. Honestly, what we discover later in this vault kind of throws it all up in the air, as they don't seem to be dealing with things too well. Shockingly, despite being Vault Tec, they aren't so dumb that they don't begin to suspect something is up, as the next entry shows. Burrow and Flint seem to be cracking under the pressure, and Collins, the third scientist, seems to have named a robot present in the vault, and she's aiding him in calming things down. Something has happened that we aren't aware of, as they seem to suspect they won't be allowed to implement the final stages of the trial on the actual vault dwellers, which is just such a shame. They still have access to the nozzles that disperse the infections though, which, as an aside, I suppose this limits any viruses or infections to airborne or an aerosol, right? It's odd, as this would imply they'd be limited to any diseases or illnesses that could be engineered to infect via this vector, which would seem to be counter to the overall goal of the vault, curing humanity entirely, as we shall see. But I suppose if they could engineer vaccines or cures for everything, they could find a workaround. The final entry from the Overseer is titled Forgiveness, and good on them, they've cut the bastards off. They have sabotaged the delivery nozzles, ensuring that the other scientists can't infect any of the people who came in here to be safe, not to be test subjects. Burrow seems to have noticed, and we'll see what happened with that very soon in their correspondence with the Overseer. Apparently they reached a Phase 3 trial far faster than expected. It's also been several months at this point. They raise the interesting point that the 3 of those scientists have enough resources to last them as long as they need, and really, this has to be true. We don't know how many scientists were meant to be in that vault, but we can see, from the size of the hidden vault later, that it was meant to be far more than 3, and they were never meant to reintegrate with the rest of the vaults, so surely they were always going to be cut off. Nothing has really changed. You've probably already started to think about what would happen if a Phase 3 trial went wrong and killed everyone in the vaults, and what happens to the Overseer during all of this. Well, we'll talk about that as well, but we need to get more information from that part of the vault first. But lastly, let's take a look at the communication logs between the hidden vault and this one. They are located under Research Comm records, and there are quite a few. The first is called Testing 123, and seems to have taken place before the bombs dropped. It's a correspondence between Collins, who we learn is called Kenneth, and the Overseer. Not much else here. The next is titled Where is Everyone? And Kenneth genius he is, has counted there are only 3 people. Burrow is apparently one of the students that Olivette was referring to, and Flint's first name is Jim. The other dwellers, as we already read, arrive fine, and Olivette is just playing it off that a mistake must have happened, and Vault Tec messed up. Which, to be fair, completely believable. No sabotage on their part. No sir. Next is Phase 1 trial, and it's in regards to some antibiotics they've been testing, with apparently promising results. We don't get told what the virus is though, but I'm sure it's bad. The Overseer is quick to ask for constant updates, wanting to see the data, and for them not to start any Phase 2 trials without their say-so. Again, just trying to keep tabs on them, and make sure they don't end up killing everyone and themselves. The next entry is about issues with their food extruder. Now, I have no idea what this is. Unless they were eating some pink paste, wink wink, then I can't recall seeing a device that does this. Apparently it connects to some protein tanks that are clogged on the side of the other vault. Now here, Burroughs mentions that any issues with tanks or nozzles need to be addressed on the Overseer's side. The Overseer didn't know this, which might imply this is where they first got the idea to sabotage the nozzles. In which case, nice one kid, you incepted the idea of your own misfortune. Anyone who has any idea what these protein tanks are meant to refer to, leave a comment, as I'm drawing a blank on something like this in any of the other vaults. Or at least, if it is present, it isn't something we ever get to see work. After this is an entry regarding the Phase 2 trials. It has some implications, to be honest. So, as discussed, they were given mole rats to experiment on in the Phase 2 trials. All good so far. But apparently, these mole rats are absolute jonkers. We'll see this later, so I won't spoil it too much, but holy Jesus. Now Flint started testing the radiation on them for some reason that they never explain. The kibble is apparently off as well, but then again Burroughs seems like a thickwit, as I have no idea why he'd eat them. But they think something is off with it, and the mole rats are larger than they should be. They've concluded that they were being experimented on. Now the only reason I can think that they test the radiation on them is that they arrived at the conclusion they were engineered to be resistant to it, which stands to reason if you consider Vault Tec was trying to survive a radioactive wasteland. I have no idea about the bioluminescence. My only guess is that there are glowing ones, which we do see in the vault, but also outside of it. Apparently one of them is smarter than the rest, and if you're thinking, well surely that will end well, don't worry, it definitely will. They're still going to use them and put them on a different diet, which achieves nothing in the end, but oh well. Now I have to raise the obvious question, does this imply the mutations in mole rats in general were Vault Tec's doing? Not as in they all spread out from this vault, but they originated in some other Vault Tec facility, and then spread out from there. It just seems like a very weird coincidence that they would have an engineered line of mole rats, and that they would also mutate by chance in the wild. Then again, if FEV was the cause in both cases, then it makes sense why they emerged separately. But we can't know for sure. The second last entry is about a delivery mechanism failure, and at this point the Overseer has already made their move. The overachiever Burrow wanted to test some placebo vapor using the nozzles, without notifying the Overseer, just to see if they were working. Now this might have just been a coincidence, or this might be because they were starting to get suspicious. This seems to have occurred after the entries, where the Overseer suspected that they knew they weren't going to be allowed to test anything on the dwellers. This then places it just before the entry where the Overseer confirms they sabotaged it, and Burroughs noticed. From here on, they must have been fully aware the Overseer had, from their perspective, betrayed them, and at this point, they get all communication cut off. The last entry is their final plea, please answer. And honestly, it's a little unbelievable. I mean, they start off by saying they don't blame them for what they've done, as conducting the trials like this would be a breach of ethics. Then they try and cover by saying it would only be from the viewpoint of the world they used to live in, so off the bat, they know what they're doing's wrong, and their only justification is it would only be wrong if the world hadn't burned down. The next part seems to indicate that Collins is the only one who figured it out, but they're worried the other two will soon. Burroughs of course being easier to manage given their age and inexperience. But it seems that Collins was trusted to carry out the communications, so they could fool them to some degree. The last part leaves me speechless. Somehow, in their head, they've been condemned to die by Olivette because of a personal sense of morality. As if they aren't the ones with a skewed sense, given what they're trying to do. How can they even believe they've been left to die? As far as we know, they were never meant to go back into the vaults, or at least only incredibly infrequently, as we shall get some different information later. If this is the case, apart from a lack of purpose, being stuck where they are, how is this situation any different? Sure, they're stuck with each other, and given they all seem awful, that's not great. But apart from that, they've more space than everyone else, and likely more resources. Now shockingly, Olivette does not reconsider, given this level-headed and well-argued response, and these three were left to live out the rest of their lives in relative luxury. Or really not, thankfully, as we shall see. So there we go, Vault 81, almost a dumpster fire, if not for the fluke of a Vault Tec employee that was morally opposed to subjecting unsuspecting people to unethical experimentation without their knowledge or permission. The goal, at least with the information we have right now, was vaccination development and also the development of new diseases, though as we'll see later, the initial goals of the experiment were a little different. After a simple Phase 1 using petri dishes, Phase 2 would involve extra thick molerats, courtesy of Vault Tec. The Stein staff here believed the kibble was altered in some way, along with the molerats. They gave them increased size. Not sure how that helps with them being useful for Phase 2, to be honest. Given the mention of radiation testing, it's likely they were engineered to be resistant. This implies that Vault Tec was somewhat interested in molerats that could survive the end of the world. The increased intelligence seems to have been an unintentional byproduct. Or was it? We get more information about them as we venture into the Hidden Vault, so we shall need to head there to learn more. Given a successful Phase 2, the use of nozzles in many of the rooms in the vaults would carry out Stage 3. Now, given they're here to research mutations and diseases due to radiation and antibodies, I assume it would happen as follows. First, a disease or virus, either altered or ordinary if they wanted to observe changes to it, is introduced via the nozzles. Then either the surviving dwellers would be used to develop antibodies, or a vaccination would be administered to test it. Now, I'm not sure how the latter would work, as generally vaccinations are injected, although there is the possibility of introducing them in aerosol form. Most of what we shall see later seems to indicate that it was mostly seen who would survive, though there is some evidence general antibodies were developed. After Olivettes learned of this, they took steps to limit the number of Vault Tec staff that would actually get called into the vaults, which I guess means that technically their actions killed a lot of people, but sure, they were Vault Tec. They hardly count. After realizing that some scientists did manage to get in, they took action and sabotaged any means they could have to harm the population. Then they cut off all access and left them to live out the rest of their lives, cruelly depriving them of their right to shorten those of others. Now, all of this leaves a lot of questions to be answered, one of the biggest and most glaring of which is this. How the hell was the Overseer meant to survive all of this, given there is no guarantee they'd survive the infection? This is something I keep coming back to as we get information later about population control within the vault. Now, there is the possibility they were meant to evacuate to the sealed section when the nozzles came on, but we don't actually get any concrete information regarding this. Now we can take a look at this reactor room and the living quarters before finally heading into the other vault to see what's going on there. Inside the reactor room we can see that, even after 2 centuries, they're still doing fine. As the Overseer said, it seems to be the only thing that hasn't been showing the same wear and tear as the rest of the vaults. Now my theory on this is because, due to the need to actually power both parts of the vault, these reactors were made much hardier, possibly due to the likelihood of the ones maintaining it dying or succumbing to an illness. They were designed to run longer without maintenance. We do know that things on this end of the vault were maintained exclusively by the unwitting vault residents, or it could be due to the Mr. Handy here, Old Rusty.
Staying pretty busy these days?
Quite so. Mr. DeLuca has made it his life's work to occupy my time. Not only do I specialize in reactor maintenance, but now I am trained in doing his laundry, fetching libations, and generally picking up after him.
Does he help out with any of the work?
If memory serves, the last bit of work he performed was when Mr. Whittaker forced him to clean up the supply room. He was also quite vocal about his distaste for the job.
Now he explicitly states he does specialize in reactor maintenance. He looks a little worse for wear, and to be honest, we've seen Mr. Handy robots that have been around since before the war looking better. So clearly he's been doing a lot in all this time. This makes it likely the vault has always had him around for reactor maintenance. Due to this, it could be that some, though we know not all, of the wear and tear is simply a lack of expertise from those in the vaults working to maintain it, along with them being overworked, understaffed, and don't have all the supplies they need. He also mentions Mr. DeLuca, i.e. Bobby, who we can see is the lad that looks like a moderate breeze would take him out. We can talk to his sister and himself to get more of their story here.
Hey, the outsider. You lost? No trading going on down here.
Where am I?
Generator room, can't you tell? Look, I'm not even sure if you're allowed in here. Most of the trading's done in the atrium. I can tell you how to get back if you want. Oh, and hey, if you got any jet on you, I may be willing to take it off your hands. Say 75 caps?
Who's it for? You?
Me, myself, and I. Don't worry, I'm not into selling. That's my sister's thing.
Can't help you there.
Damn. Well, if you change your mind or start feeling charitable, look me up. Just don't let Tina know. She'd be all over my ass.
Hey, outsider. Do me a favor. If my good-for-nothing brother asks you for Jet, tell him to buzz off.
Who's your brother?
His name's Bobby, and he's my poor excuse for a twin, so you can get a good idea of what he looks like. Look, he's a junkie, but he's getting careless. If he gets caught, we're both in trouble. And as much as I'd like to leave this canned paradise, that's not how I want to go.
You want to leave the vault?
More than you know. There's gotta be more to life than this vault. But if I leave, it's on my own terms. Not because Bobby screwed it up. Now I admit, I've got my own share of the blame here. Bobby gets his chems from me, and I keep him on a short leash. But not anymore. I'm cutting off his useless ass.
Why would you feed his habit?
He's my brother, and he's overworked. I give him a little Jet, and he perks up. He seems happy, I feel better. Done. Now that it's getting out of control, it's another story. He wants to put me at risk, he gets cut off.
If he's addicted, it won't help. He'll get his chems somewhere else.
Why do you think I'm talking to you? The only other place he could get chems is from outsiders. Believe me, if someone else was dealing in this can, I'd know.
Just the person I wanted to see. If you got any Jet, I'm buying.
So there's a bit to unpack here. First of all, Bobby looks like he'd disappear if he turns sideways, due to the overuse of Jet, I assume. Given old Rusty's comments, he reprogrammed him to do all his work for him, which seems to be the only thing he actually applied himself to. We know the Overseer and Dr. Forsyth are aware of his using, as they both comment on it, but in the Overseer's case, she doesn't have any concrete proof. Or at least something concrete enough to do something. I mean, there's not really a jail as such in this vault, although there is a security room, so I guess he'd probably just be confined to his quarters. He's been getting it from Tina, his sister. And here, we need to have a discussion about retcons. Now, as a lot of you know, the common consensus now is Jet is a pre-war drug, due to several terminal entries, comments, and it being found as a placed item in locations isolated from the Commonwealth since before the war. You can check out my retcon video if you want more information. From Tina's comments, she is the only one in the vaults with access to them, apart from traders from the outside. The vault has only been trading with the outside for a few years, so we have two possibilities. For some reason, the vault had a large enough supply of Jet, assuming it was being gradually used, the last 2 centuries. Or it's from the outside. The traders brought it into the vault and Tina took over dealing it, to Bobby for sure and presumably other residents. Honestly, given the amount of work being done here constantly, I can completely understand how this happened. People would need something to help perk them up and get them back on their feet after working so much, or to actually help them be able to work. So there would be plenty of demand for it. She likely would have been able to get a large supply of it on the cheap, then charge way more in the vaults, and then kick some of the profits back to a trader. She asks us not to sell to him, as she's cutting him off to help him due to him getting a lot worse. But this doesn't really help, and inadvertently leads to the situation that prompts us to have to explore the other vaults. Before that, a few more things on the living quarters area. First off is the classroom. The vault has a fairly small population of younglings, indicating some sort of population control is underway. Austin actually outright tells us this, but he doesn't actually know what it means. The classroom is nowhere near a capacity, and the teacher here, Curie, seems quite put out by this, but presumably there was some initial requirement in the vaults for a younger population. On the topic of the choice of unwitting test subjects, I would like to return to the comment that Rachel made regarding the vault dwellers being unusually healthy. Now, as far as we know, thanks to the efforts of the first Overseer, they were never subjected to anything that could affect them. This just leaves genetics. It's here where Vault Tec's choices may have come into play. They may have specifically chosen the vault dwellers due to their particular genetics, or other physical attributes that could indicate they're healthier, or at least less likely to succumb to disease and illness. Now, the only issue with this is they would have to have been close enough to evacuate the vault, which means they'd all have to have been from around the fens. It seems unlikely they'd find such a large amount of people that are healthier than average in such a small area. The only other explanation is that people moved there to be close to the vault. Now, I just want to snoop in some people's apartments, and then we can get back to the experiment here. Bobby's room is hilarious because the man just has Jet lying around. Not very subtle if he wanted to avoid getting in trouble. To be fair, a certain amount of usage may be fine, or it's only him the Overseer's after, as he doesn't do any work. Other people may use a little amount, and it's just ignored. The other thing I want to talk about on this floor is the hoarding of food. I think this is Dr. Penske's room, and if we go over to this chalkboard, behind it is a lot of food. Like, more food than we find in really any of the other apartments. Now, if this is her apartment, and keep in mind she's the one growing food to help sustain the vault, it's a little surprising, but I think this might be Austin. As we shall soon see, the lad has a very high sneak level, so he's probably been hoarding a lot of this food. Perhaps some of it came from the other vaults. And yes, the lad did manage to get in there, and Bobby DeLuca may have been partly responsible for that. We're now heading directly into the quest-related information about the second half of this vault. If you would like to skip the dialogue and just go straight to the discussion about the vault, I refer you to the timestamps.
You have to do something, Jacob.
I'm running the test as fast as I can, Priscilla. I can't treat Austin until I know what he's infected with.
Dr. Forsyth.
Not now, Bobby. And you, stranger, will have to wait your turn. We have an emergency here. Austin got bitten by a mole rat. Isn't that enough, Jacob? There can't be that many mole rat diseases or toxins.
Rachel is examining the mole rat. Hopefully she'll find something. But these aren't ordinary mole rats. Who knows what kind of diseases they are carrying? Because he's just a child, it's affecting him more severely.
Dr. Forsyth, please! I think I found something that might help Austin.
Bobby!
Hold on, Priscilla. What is it, Bobby?
Well, you know that door Austin found? He found it because of me. I keep my private things in there. He saw me get them.
You mean your chems?
Get to the point, Bobby. What did you find in that place?
It's like a whole extra vault in there, but half ruined and caved in. There was this terminal there, so I started poking around in it. There were some notes and stuff about using mole rats to grow viruses. But they also said that they used them to make vaccines and treatments.
A secret vault? Good lord, I've never heard of such a thing.
Bobby, you're a genius. A junkie genius. There might be a cure for whatever Austin got from that mole rat somewhere in that place. You there. How would you like to do Vault 81 a favor and possibly save my boy's life?
What do you need me to do?
Save my boy, Austin.
What's in this secret vault?
Your guess is as good as mine. From what Bobby says, it might be a medical research facility. At least I hope so. It may be Austin's only chance. Bobby here will show you where he keeps his secret stash. There is a chance that somewhere in there is a cure for Austin. If you find it, bring it to Dr. Forsyth. And for Austin's sake, please hurry.
Follow me.
Careful of the mole rats down there. If they infected Austin, they could infect you as well.
Hello, Dr. Forsyth.
Be quick and find that cure.
So the lad Austin has been bitten by one of these Titan-sized mole rats, and he isn't doing too well. Now initially we don't actually get told where he was bit, or how he was actually found and brought back. I mean, we get told later he got bit while in there, but how did they find him? Was Bobby here because he dragged him out, or did he manage to get out of it on his own? We know the mole rats were getting out, as we saw them when we arrived, so he could have been bitten out in the open, although, as we later learn, he was in the vault. But there's still somewhat of a question of how they knew about the door. Bobby said Austin found it, but he says they knew the door was there, and it's not locked. But at the same time, none of them went in, apart from Bobby, as they didn't know what was in there. It also doesn't sound like Bobby was the one who pulled him out, so a bit of a mystery there. All that makes sense is Austin managed to stumble out after he was bit. Looking at the mole rat, as someone has killed the thing, it's a little underwhelming. I know I said Titan-sized mole rats, but really it just looks like an ordinary-sized, well, mutated mole rat. The ones we see later are massive. This one just looks like what you'd find in the Commonwealth and stove in with your boot. But according to Bobby, and we also know this to be true, they were using these mole rats to incubate and grow the diseases. The only strange thing is why they still exist after all this time. As far as we know, centuries should have passed since the only scientists in there died. I mean, it was 3 lads. Not a lot of possibilities for population increase there. So something odd is going on here that these mole rats are still infected with diseases. I could believe some sort of population of them still surviving, perhaps setting up shop in the vaults and spreading out, but still not infected after so long, or at least it's unlikely. So following Bobby, who literally boots a secret compartment open, we can finally get to the bottom of what's going on here. Finally heading into the secret part of Vault 81. Well, it puts things in perspective. People up top are complaining about repairs, but really it's far, far worse down here. Boxes and containers are thrown everywhere, have been buried in soil and rock, with parts of the walls ripped away entirely. This seems to have allowed the soil and rock that was being held back to get into the vaults, burying the floor. or likely the floor has already been dug up a long time ago, given the massive mole rat presence here. A presence that we're not going to talk about just now. We'll go through the vaults and then start addressing them when we get some more information. Some of the rooms, like this one to the right as we enter, are in better repair, likely as they weren't being used as hideaways for the mole rats. This one seems to have been someone's bedroom, and as we go through the vaults, we'll get a better idea of how many people were meant to be in here. Heading out of this room and up the stairs, we can see that underneath them, the destruction gets even worse. A lot of soil and rock is building up. Given the vault is underneath the other one, it could be the damage to this one is putting strain on the vault above, as presumably they share supports and similar constructs needed to hold the vaults in place. Additionally, these large holes are likely being dug by the mole rats to get around the vault, which means the damage up top could be accumulating from them trying to do the same. At the top of the stairs, the walkway is looking a little better than the ground. However, that roof looks like it's about to collapse at any moment. I think it was probably a proper roof at one point, and then over time it slowly started to cave in, as it seems unlikely Vault Tec would just make the roof of a section of the hidden research section of the vaults all soil and rock. It's not very safe, though then again that actually tracks. At the end of the walkway on the left, part of the wall is torn open, giving us access to what looks like a living area for at least 2 of the people going off of the bunk beds. So at least we know the scientists weren't living in total luxury down here, as the residents up top seem to have a similar setup. In fact, it could be argued some of their rooms are better. Here, we can find a terminal that talks about the mole rats specifically. The first entry is the breeding program update. They had some issues with it, presumably at the beginning after the vault was locked down, but now they've sorted them. However, the mole rats are showing increased levels of aggression, and the reason may be the growth hormones. This is one of the first indicators we get that these wee bastards were not so wee. However, the more recent generations are a little more zen. Now, the bit at the end's pretty funny because, I mean, of course they're watching you. Animals can watch people. Why would that be preposterous? Now, given the entry we saw on the Overseer's terminal, we know that one of them was meant to be smarter. Now, maybe they were all smarter than the average mole rat, or have begun to take orders from this Mensa mole rat. We need to keep exploring to find out more. The entry after that is serum production, and apparently the project has been somewhat of a success. They've got 197 serums that can treat 36% of all known viruses, and apparently this improves on the previous year by 33%. Additionally, there's some overlap, with 11 serums apparently being able to treat almost 2/3 of these diseases. This seems to imply they were slowly moving towards a serum that would be somewhat of a panacea, being able to treat any disease that was, at the time, known to mankind. Presumably some unknown ones as well, given the cultivation of mutated strains. Less than 20% of these are mass-producible, and we don't know if the subgroup that treats a larger number of these diseases was within this 20%. But the robotic lab assistant, who we shall meet very soon, is trying to improve the synthesizing process. Something else to keep in mind is that, while we don't know how long they've been working, they seem to be doing very, very well with having no ability to do human trials. Now, as we learn later, serums were not the end goal of the project, so it makes sense they still have to do some trials. But still, it seems like they could have achieved a lot without them. Also, this terminal, while it does mention breeding, doesn't say they were using the mole rats to incubate the diseases. This implies that either Bobby was smart enough to figure it out, which, I mean, behave yourself, or he got further in somehow without dying. So let's try and do the same. Outside that room, we get to a more secure looking corridor that's roof doesn't appear to be preparing to give us a deathly embrace. But what is odd is the turrets and the protectrons here, and the barricade. Yeah, there's a bit to unpack here. It makes sense why the vault would have some security. A lot of them do. And this one had, or was going to have, a lot of expensive and sensitive research equipment and data. But have these defense systems just been active this whole time? I mean, we know they're hardy enough to do it. We've seen plenty of turrets and protectrons active for centuries. But why were they active? They are aggressive to us. But at this point, the mole rats will have attacked us a few times. If that's the case, then why haven't they been shooting and killing them? Unless of course they have, and the mole rats just make use of their tunnels to avoid them. The barricade was likely set up by the original researchers, as it's not likely Bobby did, as he makes no mention of being attacked in here, and Austin isn't likely either. So if the original scientists activated them and put the barricades up, well, it implies to me that something violent was occurring here before they died, perhaps even the cause of their deaths. Given the comments regarding the mole rats and the state of the vault now, I think it's pretty easy to draw a straight line between the two, and say they're connected. We need to get more information first. Now, the only other surviving person, if you want to use that word, could have set these up and activated the security measures, but we need to talk to them first. Looking at these rooms themselves, we can see they're more living quarters for the scientists that were meant to reside here. Between these two rooms and the previous one, that's 2 beds per rooms, and we can guess they weren't doubling up, so room for 6 researchers so far. we can find cans and trays scattered around them, so these could have been the rooms that the three that did manage to get here were using, though it makes more sense they'd have a bunk bed to themselves if that was the case. A bit weird otherwise. This pattern of leaving stuff at their arses continues as we make our way one level lower, and we can see, tucked away in the gloom at the back of this floor, they did have access to some explosives. No idea why they needed those though. At the bottom of the stairs we can find their canteen. It's only got 3 benches inside it, and overall isn't really that large. Given this, and the fact that we've only seen a few living quarters so far, I don't think that many scientists were meant to be here. Perhaps 12 to 15, which explains why 3 of them were still able to make some progress with the research. Again, some cans and such can be found discarded, but not really much in the way of food has been left out here. Now unless Bobby or Austin raided the place, then it's been left undisturbed all this time. Kind of raises the question of where all those supplies are. If there was less than a quarter of the staff meant to occupy this place present, there should be a lot of food left over, but we don't see it. But then again, there are a lot of sections of the vault that are collapsed, so we don't know the actual size of the place, and what is buried where. Additionally, the molerats could have been surviving off of all the food meant for the dwellers, the greedy wee bastards. Might be why the population has managed to thrive despite an apparent lack of food in this vault. Down the corridor from the canteen, we find this weird desk. I say it's weird because the 2 vents behind it are either intake or outtake, which is either going to be hot or loud. This makes it a very weird place to set up to work. There is also plenty of other space in the vaults, not even counting the sections now inaccessible due to the collapse. So this may speak to the internal tension that was emerging between the scientists, given their isolation. They were finding it harder to work together, so wanted some distance between them. We learned a bit of this when Collins was telling Olivettes that they weren't going to be able to keep things together for long. We get some more information about this later. Now past them, I know you're tempted to gaze upon the molerats. I implore you not to give in to this temptation. We shall discuss them soon when we get Zerg rushed by literally their whole family of chunkers. For now, cast thy gaze upon the verdant soil around them, and take note that even more of the vault is banjaxed. Now we can also see that they actually do have reactors, but I don't think this actually goes against my idea that the other side of the vault's reactors were still hardier due to this vault. It makes sense that the other side may have to be a backup for these ones in the event of a failure. Point in case, this side of the vault still has power, despite the reactors being buried. Lights work, as does a lot of the equipment, as far as we know, and work was still being performed here, somewhat recently, as we shall see. So it drawing some from the other vault seems likely. Up the stairs, from the buried reactors, we see the resident side of the vault was actually under observation. They have windows that allow them to view it, that, on the other side, take on the appearance of large paintings, or at least this seems to be the case. As we explore this part of the vault, we get some of the dialogue between residents after Austin is bitten.
We have to do what we can for Austin. I just don't know what I can do.
Neither do I, Priscilla.
Why him? He's just a boy.
He's going to be just fine. You'll see.
Here we heard Dr. Penske and Curie, Austin's teacher. Now if we go into the terminal below the hydroponics lab placard, we can see that it can detect if someone's inside it, and is in fact an observation station. The entry is incredibly confusing. It's talking about the crop rotation installed by Dr. Penske, or at least I assume it's her. In the author's opinion, it is proving successful in subsidizing the vault's need for food to some extent, but the part about intervention is odd. It implies that, if there was a chance that this would have led to their discovery, they'd have taken steps to stop it. Now how, I don't know, as presumably they can't just activate the incineration system, or randomly just introduce a virus in the hopes it doesn't spread too far. Additionally, they do say the dwellers do not suspect the true nature, so this is definitely after the vault was shut, not before. The final part seems to imply that not all rooms had sprayers in them, but this then raises the question of who this was. The 3 scientists here weren't able to alter the vault from their side, so how could they install hidden sprayers? Additionally, if this was in reference to Dr. Penske, then the initial group is long dead, so someone else is here, and doesn't seem to realize they can't actually infect the vault, or their own limitations with regards to interacting with it, or altering it. The term "we" is also used, but that could be the original group, or the one individual left here referring to themselves. I suppose we also kind of get an answer to what happens if something is too virulent, and would kill everyone. Pump in the cure. But they also say that spraying the food would be a good way to infect people, so it could also be they don't even know about the nozzles at all, and they just think they need some way to infect the vault populace. Overall, just a strange terminal. One more thing, the placket reads hydroponics lab, but as far as we know, and given the terminal entry, it wasn't always that. So someone definitely changed it. Up the stairs from this, we can enter the research section of the vault, with the previous section being the living quarters mostly. Here we get another conversation from the other vaults and another observation terminal, this time for the depot.
Oh, real nice, Holt. Make this about you. Don't you think about anyone other than yourself? Your daughter could get sick like Austin, and you're whining about spending time with your family?
I have things to do. We don't have to hide away in here.
You're so busy, Holt. You have so much to do. Please, explain to Erin why your needs are more important than her safety.
Just never mind.
Idiot.
Now we managed to catch a bit of a domestic there, and Holt is one of the anti-outsiders, so I second his wife. He is an idiot. It's also interesting that the audio, like with the other observation point, just automatically plays for us, as it implies that all sound from that side of the vault was always broadcast. On the terminal, we again get another entry detailing someone's musings and observations regarding the vaults. Again, they seem to be somewhat recent, as it does reference the creation of the depot. They want to use it to spread airborne viruses, presumably due to the foot traffic. This is in contrast to spraying the food in the previous entry. They go on to say that the room can be used as a backup treatment location, but I'm not sure whether this is how they want to do it or this is actually something they overheard. At this point, it's clear that whoever this is, they're planning something. Planning to continue the work of the scientists, or at least they appear to be. Whether they can actually follow through, or they're aware of their own limitations to do so, we can't be sure. Past the terminal, on the right, we come to what I think is pretty solid evidence that Austin did get pretty deep into the vault. We find a Jangles the Moon Monkey, and a truck, as well as some hoarded cola. Now ordinarily, such a setup would just be a creepy little footnote in another location, but I think it's fair to assume it could have been him, as Bobby seems to have gotten in pretty far, and Austin had to have been coming in here for something. Past this, we get to the last observation point, the Overseer's office. This of course makes no sense at all, as this viewing window is in the same level as the other one, but in the vaults, the Overseer's office is literally one floor up from the depot. So either Vault Tec has managed to bend space and time, or Bethesda shot the bed. I'll let you decide which. Here, we get some more dialogue.
You and your staff are to make sure every resident remains under stringent medical observation.
Understood. But Overseer.
No buts. This is for the good of the Vault. We can't risk this pathogen spreading, Dr. Forsyth.
Yes, Overseer.
How is Austin doing?
Not good. The infection has progressed quite rapidly.
We need a way to stop it from spreading.
Then let's hope that outsider pulls through and gets us secure.
So there isn't much here, besides her conversation with Dr. Forsyth. But the entry's again very weird. Apparently the chief scientist was in opposition to an observation port being placed in the Overseer's office. Now the only chief scientist to exist is Clinton, so they were the one in opposition. But it's here anyway, and this is very confusing. It was either already here, and the Overseer didn't know about it, or it was put in. Now as I mentioned, in all the rooms with these ports, there is something obstructing them. If the Overseer knew about them, then I can't imagine they wouldn't have taken steps to disable the surveillance. The audio is still intact, but we can't see anything through the glass. This may mean the paintings were put up to block the port's view, but this then raises the issue of what they look like behind the paintings, and how they would remain hidden if those were taken down. So the paintings may indeed be one way, and they're still active, in which case the Overseer must not have known about them. Now if this is not the case, and this one was put in after the lockdown, then I have no idea how they did this, to be honest. The one-way painting would have already had to have been there, which means they just decided not to use it before. Why they didn't want to, even after they got cut off from the vaults, I'm not sure. But if it wasn't there, then they had to somehow cut this hole and install the one-way glass/viewing port without anyone else finding out, which is insane. There's no way that would have worked out. So it already had to have been here before, to some degree, and for whatever reason, they opted not to use it. It could also be that this particular entry is far older than the others. By this I mean that, as I've pointed out, some of the entries seem to reference fairly recent goings-on in the vaults. I'm of the opinion that the entries, or the placards, may have been updated as time went on. Now they could also be very old if the hydroponics lab and the depot are centuries old. In that case, the entries could all be from when the other scientists were still alive. Otherwise, this one is older, as the Overseer's office is a fixed location, and the others have changed, given the passage of time. Really, unless we can know for sure how fixed those locations in the vault were, it's hard to say. Past this observation point, we go down a level to an even more wrecked part of the vault. A lot of lockers and containers can be found here, giving more evidence that a lot of supplies of this vault may be buried under here. Down the hall, past this room, we have our final encounter with the molerats, and now it's time to discuss them. As previously mentioned, the molerats were being used to incubate the viruses and diseases during Phase 2 of the program. However, as noted by the research staff, these molerats were not normal, more aggressive than usual, more intelligent and a lot bigger. We encounter them in hordes as we move through the vaults, and for the most part they're what we'd expect. There is some variation with the ordinary size ones, with some darker coloration, possibly for blending in with soil and rock. This contrasts with the bright pink ones we generally see. However, this extends to their teeth as well, so there is a chance I'm forgetting that mole rats can sometimes come out of the ground covered in a dirt-like texture, and this is the only difference, at least for these ones. The real shocker is when we find the units, the big uns that have been eating their Wheaties. We don't really encounter them until we hit what could be considered their nest, as it seems to have the strongest mole rats present. Here, we find the big bejesus boys, much larger than an average mole rat, though apart from that and having the ability to phase through solid matter, there isn't much that is different. The size, however, was not exaggerated, and we do have to ask the question, how? We do find one glowing mole rat down here, and given the lack of radiation, I think it's fair to say that radiation testing from long ago may have played a role in the size these mole rats reached. Although given a comment later, this glowing mole rat may not be the hyper-intelligent one that led the mole rat rebellion. Their aggression was apparently getting lower with subsequent generations, but what is more likely to me is they lured the scientists into a false sense of security. Then, after doing so, they managed to break free. We find their nest on the upper floor, and it's past a lot of pens with doors ripped off. So I think, at some point, these mole rats, having made enough gains in both mass and intelligence, broke out and wreaked havoc on the vault. This is backed up by the information we'll get very soon. Whether they were this size when this happened, or time and maybe some continued altered kibble and radiation experimentation by the only person remaining here, altered them. We can't be sure yet without talking to them. But what is clear is that these mole rats were being used to incubate the viruses, and as such, bit Austin. Now I'll say this, if they attack you, they can infect you with the mole rat disease. At that point your health is permanently down by 10%. Or you have to take the cure, which we'll get to, and let the lad die. But sure, what can you do? The rest of the lower level is pretty destroyed, with the other cages, like those in the upper level, either open or also ruined. The researchers seem to be situated right beside them, so I can see why they thought they were being watched. There's one last room here that is moderately better off than the rest. It is here that, if you weren't able to get into the Overseer's terminal in the other side of the vault, you can at least read the dialogue between them and this side. Weirdly enough, there's a random stealth boy on the counter here. Now I can see one of two possibilities. The first is one of the scientists was trying to use it to avoid the mole rats here. If that's the case, it clearly didn't work. The second is Bobby was going to use it. This is the terminal that talks about the incubation of the viruses in the mole rats, so he must have read it. How he didn't die from them, I do not know. Maybe it was him and Austin intruding that riled them up so much. Though again, he never used it, so who knows. Using the code in the holotape found on the table, we can get through a locked door on this level and get the full story about this place. Ascending a set of stairs, we pass a strange arrangement of 3 lockers with some candles and clothing laid out on them. I'm sure you can see where this is going, but it's the Miss Nanny on the other side of the sealed room that interests us.
Another stranger. Are you Vault Tec security? I've waited so very patiently for you to arrive.
Who the heck are you?
I am a Contagions Vulnerability Robotic Infirmary Engineer, or CVR-IE. The human scientists call me Curie. Or more properly, they called me this when they were alive. I repeat, are you Vault Tec security?
These mole rats carry a disease. Do you know anything about it?
My poor little darlings. They were used to grow all manner of new and interesting pathogens. Then Vault citizens would be exposed to these viruses in the hopes that they would develop new antibodies. But they never got a chance to execute their plan. Clyde got out of his cage. He was smarter than the others. My sweet Clyde. He let out the others, and those poor scientists never stood a chance. Clyde's been dead for almost 2 centuries now, but his descendants have free run of the vault. I'm rambling. Where are my manners? Are you Vault Tec security?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Superb! I placed an emergency call so long ago. I was beginning to think something dreadful must have happened. I am pleased to report I completed my primary duties 83 years ago. Thousands of pathogens were grown in the mole rat hosts. Then a single broad-spectrum cure was developed to treat them all. Very satisfying work for many decades. Now, please tell me you are authorized to release me from the lab.
Why can't you just leave?
I require verbal or written authorization. Actually, any Vault Tec employee, even you, could authorize me. You must be Vault Tec, or you couldn't possibly be here.
these mole rats were lab rats?
Why, yes. I've grown quite fond of them over the years, but they outlived their usefulness 83 years ago.
I am so authorized. You are released.
Superb. I had almost given up all hope of living here. I'll open the door for you. Since you are a Vault Tec representative, I entrust you with the broad-spectrum cure I developed. If you have an equivalent to my digital Hippocratic oath, please use it quickly to prevent any undue suffering. However, be advised, there is only one dose left, and I can no longer make any more. If that is all, I am most eager to leave.
You only have one dose?
That is correct. There used to be more, but they all expired. Sadly, the organic compounds necessary to make more have all deteriorated.
You're just giving me the cure?
My primary responsibility is to obey the orders of specified Vault personnel, even if those orders violate my ethical matrix. But since you have graciously discharged me of this duty, I can give you the cure without directly disobeying my previous order. And if you happen to use the cure to save a life, then this is just a happy coincidence, no? Hopefully now I can properly further my scientific research. Since my job here is done, I think I will follow you out.
So this is Curie, a soon-to-be companion of ours, or technically CVRI, the Contagions Vulnerability Robotic Infirmary Engineer. The naming of her as Curie by the former scientists will all be explained in due course. Apparently, she has been dutifully working away for the past 2 centuries, or I guess technically the past 120 years, give or take, as she managed to complete her work over 83 years ago. There is quite a bit to unpack here, so we'll start at the beginning, going forward. First of all, she might be a little degraded. She keeps asking if we're Vault Tec security, despite us having no actual proof that we are, or a means to verify our claims. She just accepts them. Now this could be because, after over 2 centuries, she's a little frayed and has lost some processing ability. Her overall reasoning seems to be that we are Vault Tec, as there's no other reason we'd be in one of their vaults. She still thinks that Vault Tec is a thing, and that headquarters exists, despite no contact for so long. However, she does seem to have been losing hope, and thought something may have happened, so perhaps she was still all there. She was stuck in here as the other scientists gave her a directive, and she couldn't override it herself. However, I'm not sure if she's actually been stuck in this room the entire time or not. She says she can't leave the lab, but it seems unlikely as other parts of the vault look like they've been updated, like the plaques about the observation points. Additionally, she was using the mole rats to grow pathogens, so how was she actually doing this if she couldn't get out into the rest of the vault? One possibility is that she was able to go around the vault, but then she finished her work, and since then, lacking a new directive, was stuck in this lab. Really, this is all that makes sense to me. The first thing she says is also very strange. Another stranger. As far as we know, no one in Vault 81, until now, knew about this place. The only 2 inside have been Bobby and Austin. But if that is the case, then who is she referring to? As we'll get to, the mole rats had free reign. Now we talked about how they may only be this agitated because those 2 came in here. If not, the question still remains how either of them got in here and then left. The door was still locked when we came in, and that code still beside the terminal, so it seems unlikely either of them got all the way up here. The only thing I can think of is Bobby asked her to open the door, read about the mole rats and the terminals in this room, then told her to stay here and left, and didn't mention any of that for some reason. No, I think it's more likely he used the terminal downstairs, in which case I've no idea to whom she's referring to, as Austin also likely didn't get this far for the same reasons. Now the next strange part is what she said about the mole rats. She confirms they're still carrying diseases, but this itself is quite strange. According to her, some of the mole rats, specifically the Great Clyde, were smarter. They instigated a prison break, and these absolute units killed the scientists, or at least they killed some of them, as we'll soon learn. This lines up with what we've been guessing so far, and which was hinted at in the terminal entries. But she says that Clyde's been dead for almost 2 centuries. Now, he could have been very long-lived, but it seems more likely the breakout just didn't happen that soon, and the scientists were still active for some time here. But when she finished 83 years ago, the scientists were already long dead, and up until that point, she was still using the mole rats. So, how did she manage this? If they've had free reign since Clyde broke the chains of servitude, how was she still using them to grow pathogens? Were they just not aggressive towards her? Did she have to catch them one by one? That seems impractical and unlikely. Perhaps she got the Protectrons to capture them and bring them to her. I think this right here is a bit of a gaping hole in the story. Additionally, why are the molerats still diseased? I suppose a sickness can still spread from one generation to another, but I'd have thought she'd have tried to have a more controlled environment for all this. Surely if they are always sick, that makes growing or harvesting new pathogens more of a challenge. Or it would have made the data she was getting less accurate. She didn't have much of a choice, granted, but still, it seems a little hodgepodge. Regardless, they're still infected with something, which is where her broad-spectrum cure comes in. Now, as we'll see, the overall goal of the research was not to create cures. It was to create a population of people inherently resistant to these diseases. As she states, and we read, they were never able to infect the vault. So instead, she developed cures to the pathogens grown within the molerats, as this was the only research she could undertake, while still keeping in line with her directive. She does say it was her primary duty, so we'll have to see if the terminals tell us more. It does make sense to do it this way, as they need cures to stop the diseases getting out of hand, or if they themselves got infected. She only has the one dose, however, so no magic cures for all, though if she knows how to create it, presumably she can make it again, given the right components. There is the chance said components needed to produce it don't exist in the current world, but between the Enclave and the Institute, I'm sure you could find a way. But now that we've talked to her, it's time to back up a little bit and get the rest of the details for the story here. First off, the lockers we passed as we came in. There's 3 of them, and they have lab coats and glasses on them, not to mention candles that seem to have been laid out as a sign of respect. There were 3 scientists working with her in this vault, so it's quite easy to put together, even without the terminal entries, that this is where the 3 scientists' remains can be found. It speaks to the relationship she shared with them that she paid them this level of respect and care. Or as we'll see, she could have just been following through with her wishes. This, together with her overall mannerisms, along with her comments regarding the molerats, indicates that it may be she has more range, emotionally speaking, than most of the robots we encounter. The terminals will help us with an explanation as to why this has happened exactly. Though to be fair, we have seen other examples of robots with a wide range of expression, which do not have the modifications she received. Taking a look inside the lab, apart from the medicine bobblehead, the place is pretty much cleaned out, backing up her claims that everything is pretty much used up. Though bizarrely, there are still some bags of blood left around the place. We can find 2 terminals here that give us the remainder of the information we need. The first is the CV-RIE station, although the other terminal was, ironically, the one where her actual entries can be found. On it we can find the Vault 81 mission statement, and it's got a lot of conflicting information. It starts off by saying the goal of the Vault is to wipe out disease from the human race. It goes on to explain what CV-RIE stands for, and here there appears to be a mistake, as it calls her Curie, which is actually the name she was given by one of the scientists when they started to reprogram her. Moreover, the acronym CV-RIE was probably retrofitted after the name was decided on. It also says they have centuries of biological and chemical supplies. Now, given she finished a long time ago, and there were way less people working here than were meant to be, I can assume that means that most of the supplies were lost when the vault fell to the molerats. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense that nothing's left to actually make any more serum with. It confirms the molerats were genetically altered, which does raise the question of why the scientists were trying to find out if they had been altered. It literally says yes. Most importantly, it tells us that all dwellers are test subjects. They pull the needs of the many crap, and then go on to say something very confusing. They must always maintain a breeding population. Now, I'm not sure on the specifics, but I'm pretty sure you need a certain number of pairs of humans in order to ensure genetic diversity in subsequent generations, i.e. making sure the Vault doesn't go all Targaryen. They could have chosen people ahead of time such that this degree was already present, and they wouldn't need as many people to survive, but surely they'd still need quite a few. Given this, how were they meant to ensure they didn't all die? Even if they only exposed some people, the rest, unless they immediately isolated them, could easily become infected, and the whole vault could fall. Now this may be where the cures Curie was developing on this side came in. They would already develop a vaccination, and then if people didn't develop the antibodies, or were dying off in too large a number, they would distribute the vaccination in the hopes it would stop the disease. But even then, this does not seem particularly well thought out, which is very much in line for Vault Tec, if we're being honest. The hope was that eventually, the people would be resistant to a wide array of diseases. Given the molerats, and the new pathogens that Curie was referring to, this seems to have been beyond just ordinary diseases. They needed them to be resistant to more than mere modern diseases, but mutations, or pretty much anything highly damaging that could crop up. Then as time went on, only those who survived would carry the antibodies needed to stave off these diseases, and likely any possible variations that could emerge. The thing is, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's not total immunity that's passed on, right? I mean sure, the parents might have the antibodies, and these should pass on to the child, but there's still whether your body can survive the sickness and mutations and variations, hence the need to still get inoculations, vaccinations, and still getting generally sick. I mean, is it not the case that the illnesses and diseases they'd be exposed to outside the vault would fall into the category of those they don't yet have immunity for? Wouldn't it make more sense for the goal overall to be to whittle down the population repeatedly, with only those with the strongest immune system surviving? I'm not a virologist, so if you are, please weigh in, but I've always thought that being able to produce the antibodies and having an immune system strong enough to make sure you actually survive getting sick are two separate things, even if there is some overlap. The last part again makes it confusing why they didn't know about the molerats. One of them had to have read the terminal, so they should have known. Going to the other terminal in the room, we can see it was assigned to Curie for her own use, and Collins himself requested that people respect her privacy. This tells us that, along with her feeling a degree of fondness for them, they did towards her as well, or at least Collins did. Unfortunately, the first set of entries are completely corrupted, preventing us from learning anything about the research here. Typical. Next are the personal logs of Curie. She asks that no one, even Collins, reads her entries, and the first entry is her greeting that she was ordered to write. At this point, she doesn't seem to have changed or become as aware as she is now, which we shall see was a gradual process. Collins seems to have wanted this log as a way to gauge the progress of said process, although at a certain point, as we shall see, he stopped doing so. The next is her interpretation of her colleagues, and it's hilarious. She thinks Flint is a nerd, but thinks he's easy to understand and interpret. I'm choosing to interpret this as he has no social skills, and is therefore extremely direct, likely a side effect of the poor soul spending too much time in academia. Burroughs gets a scathing review, and is apparently only good at lifting and moving things, and Curie thinks she's better, which, I mean, to be honest, is likely true. Essentially, he's a less effective version of a trolley, and, I mean, he's a grad student, so it stands to reason. She's told to let him move these things, instead of allowing her to do it. At this point, she doesn't seem to understand manners or courtesy, or at least Collins seems to think it's what Burroughs is doing. Myself, I think he just didn't want to feel useless. The next entry is corrupted, so we don't get to see the gradual unfolding of events here. Instead, the entry after it, distress, is when everything hits the fan, all at once. Apparently Burrow is refusing to leave his quarters and is in quite a state. Collins says this is due to something. Now it is reasonable to conclude this must be after they found out they were cut off from the other side of the vault. I expect his age played a part here. Again, they still had a cushy situation and survived the end of the world. The only downside to all this is they were stuck here with each other. It's also a bit odd that so many terminal entries are corrupted. Many terminals are fine after centuries of use, and these ones don't seem to have had many new entries over the years, so the corruption is a bit odd. Her last entry is eulogy. Dr. Burroughs is apparently getting on in his years, and has opted to discard his mortal coil, and do everyone the favour by passing on. The more shocking part of the entry is that his wishes were to be cremated and placed alongside Collins and Flint, so they're apparently dead as well. All of the remains now lie in those lockers. Now Curie did say the poor researchers never stood a chance, plural. Yet this entry confirms Burroughs died in his bed due to cardiac arrest. This seems to imply that, due to his advanced age, he wasn't working in the same capacity as before. Now Clive at some point pulled a Moses and freed his people. This presumably resulted in the deaths of Collins and Flint. It's unclear how much time has passed, however. We don't know how old Burroughs was when he died, but we do know that he was very young when he arrived in the vault, from the terminal entries, likely a grad student. So as long as there's no other issues or health problems, and he had all he needed, then it's been a while. On the low side, let's say it's been at least 60 years. He asked Curie to continue their work so their deaths wouldn't be in vain. However, at the bottom, she states this work was the study of pathogens and viruses, a departure from studying how to expose people and engineer a more disease-resistant human. Therefore, at some point after they realized they were trapped, they decided to switch up the research goals, if for no other reason than to have something to aim for. After her entries, we can find the Collins archive and get some information from the big lad himself, before he went and got himself killed. His first entry is boot up, and it seems like he made it just after they got stuck in the vault. Even now, he's already suspicious about Olivettes, although nothing so concrete as the nozzles being sabotaged seems to have occurred yet. Regardless, due to them being short-staffed, he's decided to modify a Mr. Handy robot, and given how he refers to it as a Mr. Handy robot, this seems to imply Curie was not something the Vault, and as such the team, came with. Now this then raises the question about the first entry we read on a terminal literally called the CVRIE station, and that it was from the Vault Tec board of directors. If he actually went back and modified it, then it explains why the section regarding the molerats, as well as the information about Curie, is there, despite her name not coming along until later. If it was actually from the board, and already there, then the next entry is very weird. The entry is called Personality Profile, and in it, it seems to document the beginnings of Curie. He talks about the women he used as a template for her personality, explaining the French accent. He starts loading her with all the information they have on hand with relation to science. Lastly, he decides on her name, Curie. Given this, he must have modified that terminal entry for future generations of scientists, as it has too much information that only came about after the vault was locked down. But given they were the only ones there, with no chance of any others stepping up, this seems to have been wishful thinking on his part, or the entry was just plain wrong. Therefore, it makes no sense that the Vault Tec board of directors placed it and the entry before all of this. Although what is still a bit of a mystery is why they didn't seem to know, going in, that the molerats were modified. I've got a weird theory on why this is the case, but we'll get to that after we've wrapped up the rest. The second last entry is therapeutic, and apparently not everyone was initially on board with the idea of using Curie and having to address her as an equal. Which, fair enough, it probably was weird to start out with. But now Flint and Burroughs are on board. We also get the name Rebecca, which might be the Overseer's first name, but this is never confirmed, although I can't imagine who else Burroughs would be differential to. Curie seems to be playing the role of keeping everyone grounded and on task. I imagine that Colin's suspicions have grown even more at this point, although whether or not the other two are yet aware remains to be seen. He decides that, given how far along she's came, given all what she's learned, and presumably certain restrictions on how much she can change being lifted, he decides to leave her be. He wants to see how she develops and changes over time. I imagine for him this is somewhat of a stand-in to the development and adaptation they were expecting to see in this vault, albeit on a shorter time scale and a smaller scale. The final entry is Ongoing Directive, and we get his final thoughts on Curie, as well as what has been happening in the vaults. Apparently years have passed at this point. He hasn't wanted to touch the terminal ever since Curie took it over, given how much it means to her, or at least how much he thinks it means. Her entries make her seem to be quite indifferent to it all, but we'll get to that. Given how long it's been, this means the Molerat uprising had to have taken a while to occur. Flint has only now just died, and we know Burroughs was the last to go. Now he never actually mentions that Flint died to the molerats, but Curie did say, those poor researchers, so at the minimum 2 of them had to have died to the molerats. We know it wasn't Burroughs, which means Flint somehow got killed, and then Collins did later. Although how or why they didn't take better precautions, or just stop using the molerats altogether, I don't know. We know Curie was for a long time after this, so maybe they thought they had taken precautions, but not enough to deal with the level of intelligence at least one of the molerats had reached. Collins likely didn't survive long, as if Clyde was responsible for this, then all this had to have occurred in the lifetime of a molerat. Though given the genetic modifications, we can't be sure just how long this was now. Or this entry, or Curie's speech, was wrong, and they didn't all die to the molerats, but only one of them, with different causes for the rest. We can't be sure. He goes on to state that Curie has evolved far beyond what he thought she would. He says she has a great interest in scientific research, and she's been grappling with highly abstract concepts like morality. He finishes by saying that he hopes that one day, she can leave the vault and see the world. Now of course this is where we, who are definitely Vault Tec security, come in. We free her from her lab, and give her the chance to explore the world. Now in the concept of her morality and how advanced she was meant to be, I have my doubts. Yes, she interacts with us, and she seems to be very social. But to be honest, a lot of robots seem capable, to some extent, of similar levels of expression. But she doesn't seem to have shown much empathy to the overall plight of the Vault Dwellers. Yes, she gave us the cure, but she was also undertaking research for a long time that, had the nozzles not been broken, would have subjected the Vault Dwellers to death, for the most part. Also, as we discussed, she could have been the one who was making entries in the observation terminals, and they seem fairly recent. Given this, she didn't seem particularly moral. To be honest, I think, given Collins was responsible for so much of the change in her, he saw what he wanted to see. He was cooped up with only 2 other human beings for years. Relative to this, any change in the baseline level of expression and empathy a Miss Nanny is capable of showing in comparison to the only other contact or communication he has, could have came off as far more significant than it actually was. There was likely also an element of her being the only real work he seems to have actually achieved. They didn't seem to be making a lot of progress at this point, so maybe this all felt like more of an achievement to him. After this, all that is left is to take the cure and give it to Austin.
The cure? You found it?
How is Austin doing? Do you think he'll survive the cure?
He's been unconscious since shortly after you left.
Here, take the cure, and use it on the boy.
Only 1 dose? I hope this works. If it doesn't, there won't be anything to analyze to try again. Let's hope this works.
I heard you had returned.
it shouldn't be long.
What? Where am I?
You're in the clinic. You were really sick, Austin. Our visitor from the Commonwealth saved your life.
Really? Gee, thanks, mister.
I was worried to death about you, Austin. What got into your fool head? Going into a place like that?
Nothing exciting ever happens here. I just wanted to see what was in there.
Well, if it hadn't been for our friend here, you might have died. Thank you. I know you made sacrifices to help him. I know Dr. Penske will be grateful. For my part, I'd like to give you this syringe. I had it for years and never really had a use for it.
She's not the only one. The whole vault is thankful. I'd like to give you a room here in the vault. A place you can call your own. It's in the main hall, on the left as you get off the elevator. Once again, thank you. I hope you enjoy your accommodations. I wanted to say thank you again for what you did for Austin. You've opened a lot of eyes around here, including my own. I had no idea of the dangers Vault Tec had hidden away so close to home. I can't believe so many died just behind our walls.
What do you know about Vault Tec?
I'm afraid not much. I've spent my entire life being thankful for the vault, for the walls that protected us over 2 centuries. But not once have I had contact with them.
Whatever Vault Tec had planned, it failed and took their entire staff out with it.
No arguments here. I hate to think of what they had planned for us. But on the good side, you made a real impression on our anti-Commonwealth people. They're realizing outsiders really can be trusted, and do more good than just providing resources. You'll always be welcome here, and I hope you make a habit of visiting. Having a trusted outsider would help serve as a reminder that the Commonwealth isn't something to fear and avoid.
A moment, please. I have been trapped so many years. I believe it's customary to thank you for your role in saving me. My entire life has been in this vault. I have analyzed and learned everything there is to know here. So now I must see the rest of the Commonwealth, consult with scientists, unearth more data to challenge my hypothesis.
What are you looking to learn up there?
Down here is an enclosed system, and without the introduction of new mutagens, viruses or bacteria, it is quite dull, medically speaking. The world up there is infinitely more complex. Who knows what diseases can be found and studied?
After the bombs, the Commonwealth is a little lacking in the science department.
But surely there is still men of learning out there, and if nothing else, there is data. Please, monsieur, can you take me with you?
It's no picnic up there. Anything you can do to help us survive?
But of course! I have been equipped with medical equipment. If you become injured in our journeys, I can administer stim packs. I also have defensive capabilities, a laser. But surely there's little reason to use that.
Come along then.
Excellent. We must embark at once.
The work Curie did has paid off, as the lad doesn't die. The Overseer thanks us and gives us a permanent space in the vault, with the hopes that, because of our actions, maybe people will be a bit more accepting of outsiders. They bloody better be. She also says something very weird. I can't believe so many just die behind our walls. It was 3 people, 150 years ago, likely more. Let's not get carried away here. Makes me think that maybe, originally, there was meant to be some other plotline here, and it was cut. She's also, like apparently most of the Overseers in this vault, totally ignorant of Vault Tec. She knows nothing about them, and has never had any contact with them at all. It stands to reason it wouldn't happen in her lifetime, as the company, in its original form, is long gone by this point. Talking to Curie, we got the chance to take her with us. But again, her primary drive, at least with what she's so far revealed, is to analyze more viruses and bacteria. Even after all this time, her directive hasn't changed much. She does have more of a story, but that's a video for another time. I think this drive for knowledge may have played a role in Collins otherwise associating to her a greater level of awareness, but maybe I'm just a cynic. So this was Vault 81, a vault that welcomed in many from areas around the fens, to offer them shelter, comfort, safety, rare strains of viruses heretofore unseen in the modern world. Yes, the vault had it all. No doubt it would have been a place of unspeakable suffering, if not for the rarest of creature. A unicorn, one could say. Someone from Vault Tec with morals and a conscience. Overseer Olivettes brought in to be a replacement candidate after the other option, Duncan, fell through. They were quickly told what this vault would entail and what would be done to the residents, and they said no. They took it upon themselves to stop what Vault Tec was attempting. Their first attempt to do this was to sabotage the call system that would inform all the scientists that were to be placed in a hermetically sealed section of the vault. However, 3 still managed to get in: Collins, Burroughs, and Flint. They began to report to the Overseer, get used to their side of the vaults, and settled in for many, many years of research. But as we know, it didn't really work out for them. Shortly after getting into the vaults, they reported some irregularities with the molerats, a combination of apparent increased intelligence that was confirmed in at least one, Clyde, the breaker of bonds, and a distinct increase in mass, or as the younglings say, thickness. They attributed this to a combination of experimentation with the molerats, which, you know, may or may not have involved FEV, and modified kibble, which Burrow eats, for some reason that's never explained. But putting all that aside, they set out to pursue their goal, unaware that the Overseer was already setting out to stop them. The Vault's overall goal was simple: take a portion of the population that, at least from what we can see, was healthier than average, stick them in a vault, then over many generations, periodically infect them with various souped-up pathogens, viruses, and diseases. Now, the alterations to these seem to have been in an effort to predict what changes may have occurred on the outside of the vaults, and ensure that the sought-after immunity to them would have already developed. Yes, despite their creation of vaccines, the goal was not to develop cures to all these. It was to whittle down the population repeatedly to determine the subset that would have the greatest natural resistance to all manner of maladies, to create a type of human that, when they emerged into the new world, would be ready to face virtually any type of illness and come out on top. Now, my issue with this again comes back to how the antibodies are passed on. I'm not sure if using this as a means to determine who can develop antibodies, as opposed to who in general has the best immune system, would have been better. Sure, they appear close in terms of meaning, but wouldn't a better immune system also factor in to how badly you were affected in the first place, as well as how well you recovered, and how long it took? Obviously, this also requires antibody production, so I'm not saying this wouldn't have worked with respect to actually finding people that could survive, but the focus on antibody production as opposed to better overall immunity seems like an oversight. Again, not an expert. Please weigh in if you are. However, given they were working on vaccinations, and we know Curie created a pretty broad spectrum one, then it could have been a secondary goal. As discussed, they'd need a way to stop the infection spreading beyond control, or getting to them, so they'd need a way to stop them. Additionally, they could have just developed the vaccinations, and then dispersed them into the vaults to achieve some degree of immunity there. As time went on, they got closer and closer to a Phase 3 trial. However, at some point, the maintenance of equipment came up, and the Overseer realized that the 3 of them couldn't access the nozzles from their side for maintenance. This opened up an opportunity for them to put a stop to all of this before anyone got hurt. They sabotaged the nozzles, and either shortly before this, or just after, the 3 scientists began to get suspicious. All of it came to a head when Olivette cut off all contact with the isolated section of the vaults, leaving them in darkness as to what was happening on the other side. As it turned out, quite a lot. Burroughs was not doing too well for a while there, but overall the work continued, at least for a time. At some point, however, Flint died, then Collins. Now we know for certain that some of this was due to the uprising of the molerats, but given the gap between both deaths, it's still a little unclear if Collins died the same way, despite Curie's comment, or how much time had passed between those deaths, or why Burroughs died of old age much later, yet the molerats still seem to have free reign. Curie may have started using them again after his death. We just don't know. On the topic of the molerats, one weird thought I had, which I mentioned before, is whether they were also part of the experiment. Was Vault Tec also experimenting on how larger, more aggressive, and more intelligent animals could be contained by researchers, or the impact they'd have on research environments they were in? I mean, experimenting on the ones inflicting experiments on the dwellers or somebody else is not unheard of for them. We saw this in Vault Tec Among the Stars, but it could have just as easily been poor planning on their part. The activation of the security systems could have been a long-standing measure that was taken after the first death, or the second. Really, it doesn't matter how they died. Either way, they would be long dead even if they had went the way of Burroughs. But even then, Curie, somehow, finished all the work, developing a broad-spectrum cure for a variety of illnesses and diseases, including whatever has persisted inside the molerats after all these centuries, which was great news for us if we got bit, though not so much for Austin in that case. Fast forward over a century after the death of Burroughs, and Vault 81 is falling apart. The residents are pulling double shifts with the amount of maintenance work needing to be done, and with their, up until recently, isolation, they've been running on empty fumes with respect to supplies. Now we can't be sure exactly how bad the situation was when McNamara took over. Obviously the food situation wasn't great, as would always be dwindling. However, she didn't seem to be aware of this, and the repair issues only really seemed to have cropped up after her tenure as overseer began. Now she must have been overseer for a while, as she opened the vault 10 years ago, but as Mark told us earlier, they were barely getting by before they opened up, so the decline seems to have been quite sudden. This motivated the decision to open the vaults, letting in all of the Commonwealth hooligans, present company definitely included. Apart from Miranda kind of being catfished, I don't think anything all that bad has happened yet. The idea behind a lot of the weariness seems to be that the wrong person could be let in, not that something has as of yet occurred to justify this viewpoint. This was the state of the vault for 10 years, with it culminating in around-the-clock repairs being done with a dwindling stockpile of supplies, even with the vault being open. The use of jet may have also proliferated through the vault, given the need to stay sharp during all this work. While all of this was going on, Curie was sitting stuck in a lab for an indeterminate amount of time, although from what she said, the whole 83 years is likely. While this happened, the molerats, possibly subsisting off the massive amount of food stockpiled in the vault, started to thrive. Now we don't know if they got out of the vaults, but given their tunneling, it's certainly possible. As they burrowed into the other vaults, they broke it down, shattering walls, caving in rooms, and overall lessening the integrity of the vault. While this happened, the other vault was likely being damaged as well, due to many parts of it being located beside, underneath, or above the hidden vault. It's never outright said, as far as I can recall, but it seems pretty straightforward to draw a line directly from the damage by the molerats to the damage in the vaults. How long before it would have reached a point where they couldn't fix it and had to evacuate, we can't be sure. But I think it's safe to say that if things had continued as is, then it wouldn't have been that long. Bobby DeLuca found the entrance to the hidden vault at some point. However, how this was accomplished, we don't know. I never got any dialogue option that explained it. I'm also still baffled how he isn't dead, as the molerats were down there the whole time, and somehow I never killed him. Though he never explicitly states how long he'd been using the vault to store the chems, so it may not have been too long. Austin followed him in, got bit, and either made it out himself, or Bobby dragged him out, though if that is the case, he doesn't seem to have brought it up, at least in the dialogue that we get. We venture into Vault 81, and we get to see a lot of what is likely contributing to the damage in the other vaults, specifically the cave-ins and collapsed walls and supports, no doubt caused by the molerats tunneling through the place. General degradation could also be the cause, but for now I'm blaming the molerats. We start to encounter them quite quickly as we move through the vaults, and if we get infected, we may have a hard choice to make. Or not, it might be very easy for you to let Austin die. I'm not going to judge. We eventually find Curie and learn her story. She dutifully worked away for years on her own, and then, I guess, just kind of hovered there for over 80. She never actually tells us in the vault that she hibernated, so unless it's dialogue I missed, or we get it later, I'm not sure. As mentioned, there is more to her story, but we can cover that another time. What the future of the vault is going to look like, we can't say for sure. They have more space now, and if they can fix it up, a new vault to fill with people. Just how much is left of the supplies from the other vaults, we can't say. The molerats and Curie may have cleaned the place out. Or if they're lucky, they can excavate some of the sections, get the supplies, and possibly lessen their current resource issues. But the vault is falling down around them, so it may be that none of these are options. With Penske's crops in hand, they might need to leave, to step out into a changed world that, up until this point, they've been mostly shielded from. A world full of, for many of them, the lesser people that they wanted to be separated from, and to live in, relative to them, a larger degree of comfort. How they'll survive in this world, we can't be sure, but if nothing else, it'll be a rude awakening for those of them that have looked down on the non-dwellers, the people that are actually adapted to surviving in this new world, much more so than these dwellers who, if not for the rare conscience of their overseer, were meant to be put through hell, so they would be.